The most terrifying part of this wedding was not the helicopter. It was the lie Charlotte had been living long before it landed. She believed she was choosing safety, respectability, order. But in truth, she was walking into a carefully staged prison built by a man who needed her as decoration, not as a wife. Then the past returned from the shadows wearing black, descending from the sky like a consequence she could never outrun. Ethan did not just interrupt a ceremony, he shattered an illusion. Because this story is not merely about a bride rescued at the altar. It is about power, control, and the cycle of damage created when men mistake possession for love. And in the middle of it all stands Charlotte, forced to decide which kind of violence is easier to survive: betrayal or truth.
Feels 2 hours. An arbitrary measure of time, yet within it, Charlotte Bennett was scheduled to architect a future with one of Chicago's most promising legal minds. Instead, she finds herself in a self-imposed prison, the bridal suite, launching a final, desperate missive to the only man who had ever truly fractured her reality. "If you still want me, come get me," a signal cast into the void, with no awareness of its recipient. She remained oblivious to the truth that for years, Ethan Hayes had existed as a phantom, a guardian operating in the periphery of her life, anticipating the precise moment when the fault lines in her constructed world would appear. So when the percussive beat of helicopter blades usurps the wedding march, and a hardened silhouette emerges to claim her before all witnesses, Charlotte's entire narrative is incinerated, revealing the foundational deceptions both men had concealed. To understand this collapse, we must rewind. Back to the genesis of the first hairline fracture. Charlotte Bennett's identity was built on a singular premise: an innate ability to read human intention. It was a skill inherited from a mother who could detect falsehood from across a room, and a father whose construction empire was founded on a gut instinct for integrity. She was raised in a lexicon of subtle cues: the posture of a person, the tremor in their voice, the flicker in the eye that precedes a lie. And so, in the final accounting, the devastating blow wasn't that Nathan Calloway had deceived her. It was that a quiet, intuitive part of her had registered the deception all along, and she had actively chosen to ignore it. The first indicator, the initial tremor in the foundation, manifested on a Tuesday afternoon, a mere 3 weeks from the ceremony. Charlotte was en route to a lunch with Nathan at the establishment where their story began. A gesture he'd orchestrated for its sentimental value, but he canceled 20 minutes prior. The message was, of course, a text. Client emergency. Disappointment was a minor inconvenience. She understood. Nathan was a partner at a dominant Chicago law firm, where crises were currency. As she returned to her vehicle, she saw him, half a block away, outside an unfamiliar coffee shop. And he was not by himself. He stood with a woman, dark-haired, attractive. She held a small child, perhaps 3 years of age, and Nathan's hand rested on the small of her back. The exact possessive, gentle gesture he reserved for Charlotte. It was an act of casual ownership. The woman was laughing at his words, and the boy was reaching diminutive, sticky fingers toward Nathan's face. In response, Nathan leaned in, pressing a kiss to the boy's forehead. Charlotte froze on the pavement, a witness to a scene her mind could not process. A sister, perhaps? The wife of a colleague? There had to be a rational explanation that would invalidate it, the cold dread colonizing her system. But Nathan had no sister. And the way that woman regarded him, that was not the look one gives a husband's associate. Charlotte said nothing. She couldn't. She simply pivoted, a specter on the sidewalk, and retreated to her car. Her hand trembled so violently it took 3 attempts to seat the key in the lock. The drive was an indistinct haze, or mind, a vortex of scenarios, each more corrosive than the last. "You are constructing a narrative from nothing," she told herself. "Confront him calmly tonight, and a simple explanation will render this entire episode absurd." These were the soothing lies she administered to herself all afternoon. She believed none of them. That evening, Nathan arrived with roses, offering a flawless apology for the canceled lunch. He kissed her, prepared their meal, and inquired about her work curating the art gallery. He was the platonic ideal of a fiancé, charming, attentive, an absolute fabrication. But as he moved through her kitchen, retrieving wine glasses from her cabinets with an air of ownership, a profound chill settled deep in her bones. She was observing a complete stranger. Nathan, she began, her voice a study in control. Where were you? Feels. Really, today? He showed no reaction. I told you, babe. Client meeting. The Henderson case is an absolute disaster. Which coffee shop? He paused, his gaze locking with hers. What? You mentioned the office. Feels. I was just wondering which coffee shop you were at when I tried to reach you. His expression remained a perfect mask, but his eyes became vacant, a flash of pure ice. Feels. I never said I was at a coffee shop. I was in the office. Right, Charlotte whispered. My mistake. She let it go. For the moment. But sleep offered no escape. Lying beside Nathan in the darkness, the rhythm of his breathing a source of mockery, Feels. She tried to pinpoint the exact moment she had abdicated her own intuition. She sought the memory of when the fantasy of security became more valuable than the truth itself. And the answer arrived in the stillness of the night. Feels. Around 3 a.m, it all began the day Ethan Hayes vanished from her life. Ethan. Even now, 7 years later, the name was a phantom limb, a deep contusion on her psyche that never fully healed. Feels. Charlotte had become adept at the art of forgetting him, erecting psychological walls around those memories so formidable that on most days their existence could be denied. But tonight, with the stench of Nathan's lie polluting the air, Feels, every one of those defenses disintegrated. Feels. She was 17 years old when she first saw Ethan Hayes. He materialized on their front porch one September afternoon, his entire world contained in a single black trash bag. His expression braced for an inevitable impact. Charlotte's father had discovered him on a construction site, a young man working under the table, surviving on the margins. Feels. He was 16, painfully thin, and so withdrawn he was almost silent. His mother died last month, her father explained to her and her mother in a hushed tone. Foster care is a dead end. The kid's been sleeping in a friend's car. Feels. I said he could use the guest room while we figure things out. Charlotte's mother, for whom any crisis could be solved with a home-cooked meal, went immediately to the kitchen. And Charlotte, who had been irritated by the interruption, Feels, registered the look on Ethan's face and felt a fundamental shift within her. He was terrified. He was trying desperately to conceal it, but the fear was starkly visible in his eyes. Bathrooms upstairs, she heard herself say, Feels, her voice softer than she'd intended. Second door. There are clean towels in the closet if you want a shower. Dinner will be ready in 20 minutes. Ethan just looked at her, as if processing an unfamiliar dialect. Then, Feels, so quietly it was nearly inaudible. Thank you. Feels. This was the inciting incident. Ethan remained. 1 week bled into 2. A month passed. Her parents became his legal guardians, and with that, Charlotte was assigned a role she never anticipated. A sister. Except he never, for a single moment, Feels, felt like a brother. Initially, he was a ghost in their home, unobtrusive, deliberate, perpetually anticipating eviction. He completed chores without prompting, maintained his room with military precision, Feels, and wielded please and thank you like incantations against abandonment. Every day after school, every weekend, he worked construction alongside her father, stockpiling every dollar earned. Feels. He never spoke of his mother, his previous life, or anything that carried the weight of a wound. Yet it was clear to Charlotte that the boy was composed entirely of scar tissue. But slowly, with painstaking slowness, the armor began to recede. Feels. He started to laugh at her terrible jokes. He would debate with her over film choices. He migrated from the isolation of an armchair to the space directly beside her on the sofa. Feels. And the way he looked at her began to change, not as the daughter of his benefactors, but as something else entirely. For Charlotte, the fall was imperceptible, then absolute. It crystallized on the night of her 18th birthday. Feels. Her parents hosted a large party, the neighborhood in attendance, the cake a monument to sugar. Ethan, characteristically, remained on the periphery, a silent observer. But later, Feels. After the guests had departed and Charlotte was alone cleaning the kitchen, he emerged from the shadows holding a small, imperfectly wrapped box. Feels. I had no idea what to get you, he murmured, his gaze indirect. But I saw this, and it reminded me of you. Inside lay a silver bracelet. It was simple, delicate, adorned with a single tiny charm, a bird in flight. Feels. It must have represented a significant portion of his earnings. Ethan, this is... You shouldn't have. You're always talking about leaving, he interjected, his voice low. About Paris, the museums, all of it. I know you're going to fly away from here someday. Feels. I wanted you to have something to remember, that someone was watching you earn your wings. Feels. Charlotte finally lifts her gaze to meet his, and what she finds is the anatomy of a broken man, a cautious creature who had learned to bury every impulse beneath a mountain of silence. Yet, she could perceive the fissures in his emotional armor. Heels. She watched him look at her as if she were the last remaining lifeboat on a sinking ship. "I don't want to fly away from you," she whispers, and the words hang in the air. Ethan freezes, completely still. "Charlotte, I'm serious." Heels. "I don't care what happens or where I end up. I just want you there with me." And then he kisses her. It is a soft, hesitant, and utterly perfect gesture. In that single moment, the very axis of their world seemed to shift. In the beginning, Heels, their connection was a secret. They were paralyzed by the thought of what her parents might say, terrified of disturbing the fragile peace Ethan had only just managed to find. But a secret is a living thing, Heels, and it cannot breathe for long in a house that small. Heels. It refuses to stay buried. It took her mother a week to see it, and when she did, there was no anger, not a trace of disappointment. She simply took both their hands and said, "Take care of each other. You are both so precious, and if one of you shatters," Heels, "I'll have 2 broken children instead of 1. Her father was quieter, more watchful, but he never tried to end it. He just cornered Ethan one afternoon, making him promise with a dead serious intensity to always, always treat her right. And for 2 years, Heels, he kept that promise. 2 whole years of Ethan arriving on her college campus after his dusty construction shifts, a coffee in his hand, stealing kisses between the silent library shelves. Heels. For 2 years, Charlotte effectively taught Ethan that it was acceptable to be loved, that he was worthy of having something good in his life. 2 years spent sketching out the blueprint for a future that, for the very first time, Heels, felt like something they could actually build. And then, one Friday night, Ethan simply fails to show up for dinner. Charlotte calls him 6 times. She texts him more than a dozen times. Complete radio silence. By midnight, a cold Heels. Sharp panic begins to set in. By sunrise, she is pounding on his apartment door, questioning neighbors who can only shrug, admitting they hadn't seen him for days. The apartment wasn't merely empty. It had been scrubbed clean, Heels, as if he were a phantom who had never existed at all. Her father exhausted every option, calling in favors, checking his work sites, even filing a missing person report. But Ethan Hayes had vanished. Heels, wiped entirely off the map as though he were nothing more than a fleeting dream. No letter, no explanation. Heels, not even a rushed goodbye text. Just gone. For months, Charlotte existed in a waking nightmare, utterly convinced that something terrible had occurred, that he was injured, or worse. She hardly ate. Sleep became a distant myth. Her parents watched her, Heels, terrified she was simply going to waste away into nothing. The nightmare came to an abrupt end 6 months later, when her father sat her down with the bank statements. The day before he disappeared, Heels, Ethan had withdrawn every last cent from his savings account. That was the instant Charlotte was forced to confront the truth. He wasn't taken, he left. He had made a choice to walk away, Heels, without even offering her the dignity of a cheap lie to cushion the impact. And in that moment, something deep inside Charlotte froze solid. She stopped crying, she stopped searching, Heels, and she stopped believing love was anything more than a foolish story you tell yourself just before life arrives to call you a fool, Heels. She completed her degree, secured an excellent position at a gallery, and constructed a life for herself that was neat, orderly, and above all else, safe. When Nathan Calloway entered that gallery 2 years ago, Heels, radiating an aura of success and unshakable confidence, Charlotte viewed him as the perfect antidote to the memory of Ethan Hayes. Nathan possessed no dark secrets, no emotional vortex to be pulled into. What you saw was precisely what you got, Heels. He would never simply vanish into the night, primarily because he would never make her care enough to even register his absence. Except, that wasn't entirely accurate, was it? The morning after witnessing Nathan with that woman and the small child, Heels, Charlotte called in sick and did something she had never once considered doing. She began to sift through Nathan's personal belongings. A wave of self-disgust washed over her, but the desperate, clawing need to know was infinitely stronger. Heels. His laptop was locked down tight, but his tablet was not. First, she discovered the emails. There were dozens of them, stretching back 18 months. The woman's name was Jennifer. She resided in Evanston, in a house that Nathan was paying for, Heels. The little boy's name was Michael. He was 3 years old, and he was Nathan's son. Charlotte stumbled into the bathroom, her body convulsing as she threw up. Shaking, she returned to the tablet and continued her excavation, Heels. The messages themselves were so painfully normal, so domestic. Jennifer reminding Nathan to pick up diapers. Nathan expressing worry he would miss Michael's bedtime. Jennifer sending photographs from Michael's first day of preschool. Feels. They read like correspondence between a husband and a wife, because that is precisely what they were. Nathan was living two completely separate, parallel lives. A marriage to Jennifer and an engagement to Charlotte, and Jennifer was aware. Oh yes, feels. The emails made that fact abundantly clear. She referred to Charlotte as that gallery girl. She complained about the inconvenience the wedding would pose, about Nathan's assurance that it was all for appearances, feels, a strategic maneuver necessary for his career. Apparently, a partnership at his prestigious firm came with a certain kind of image, an image that Jennifer, according to Nathan, simply did not fit. But Charlotte did. Charlotte was the polished one, feels the proper one, the one you place in wedding photographs and parade before clients. Jennifer was the one he came home to, feels. Charlotte just sat there on the floor of her living room, the entire architecture of her life lying in ruins around her, and she fought to draw a breath past the rising tide of rage. It wasn't heartbreak. She realized with a strange sense of detachment, feels, that her heart felt nothing at all. She had never loved Nathan enough for that. No, this feeling was pure, unfiltered fury. Fury at Nathan for the deception, at Jennifer for her complicity, feels, and at herself for being so desperate for a feeling of safety that she had willfully ignored every single warning sign. She should cancel the wedding. She should hurl his belongings into the street, expose his lies, feels, and ruin him just as he was planning to use her. Her fingers were literally closing around her phone to do exactly that when she heard his key turning in her front door, feels. He entered with a smile, holding takeout from her favorite restaurant. Feeling any better, sweetheart? I brought you lunch. He stopped abruptly when he saw the look on her face, his gaze darting to the tablet she held in her hand, feels. For a fraction of a second, a flicker of genuine fear crossed his features. Then it vanished, replaced by a disturbing emotionless coldness. I can explain, he said, his voice low. I don't want your explanations, feels. Her own voice sounded foreign to her ears, thin and brittle. I want you to get out. The wedding is off. We are finished. Nathan calmly placed the food on the kitchen counter. Then he walked across the room, sat on her sofa, heels, and settled in as if he owned the place. No, he stated, his tone almost pleasant. We're not. Charlotte could only stare at him, completely stunned. Excuse me? The wedding is in 3 weeks, Charlotte. Everything is arranged. Heels. My entire firm will be in attendance. The senior partners, our most important clients, everyone who matters in my world. I am not canceling it because your feelings have been slightly bruised. My feelings? Nathan, you have an entire secret family, feels. And that, he said, his voice still terrifyingly calm, has absolutely nothing to do with you. Jennifer is aware of the arrangement. She is perfectly fine with it. You are the only one creating a problem here. I am calling off the wedding, feels. Charlotte repeated, rising to her feet, needing to create distance between them, feels. And if you are not gone in 60 seconds, I am calling the police. Nathan actually let out a laugh. It was a short, sharp, dismissive sound. And you will tell them what precisely? That your fiancé's personal life is somewhat complicated? Feels. I am sure they will be deeply concerned. I will tell everyone. I will go to your firm, I will. You will do nothing, Nathan interrupted, getting up from the sofa. The mask of the nice guy was beginning to fracture. Feels. Do you have any comprehension of what I do for a living, Charlotte? I dismantle people's lives in a courtroom. I locate every single weakness, every vulnerability, and I apply pressure until there is nothing left. Feels. Do you honestly believe you will be the one to walk away from me without a single scratch? Charlotte's throat felt as dry as bone. Are you threatening me? I am explaining the reality of your situation. Nathan took a step towards her, feels, and she retreated until her back was against the wall. Feels. Your father's construction company, the business that has supported your family for your entire life, it functions on 1,000 tiny permits and inspections. Feels. Details that could suddenly become incredibly complicated if the right people were to start asking questions. I know people in the city attorney's office, in the inspector general's office. I know people in every place that matters. You couldn't, feels. I can. I will. And that is just your father. Your mother, she volunteers at that community center, correct? The one that must fight for its funding every single year? I just so happen to sit on the board that approves that funding. Feels. So let's consider this. Your best friend from college, the one with that adorable little bakery downtown. It turns out she is financed by a rather questionable loan, a loan that could be called in, say, yesterday, deals, if certain banking regulations were suddenly enforced with extreme prejudice. Charlotte felt the soul drain from her body. Why? Why are you doing this? Because this wedding is happening, Nathan said, feels, with the same casual tone he might use to order a coffee. Morrison and Hale is about to make me their youngest senior partner in history, and that promotion requires a certain image, a beautiful, intelligent wife from a good family. You, feels. After 6 months, the partnership will be solidified, and we will get a quiet divorce. I will even compensate you handsomely for your trouble. You can invent whatever narrative you want to explain why we broke up, feels. But in 3 weeks, you are going to walk down that aisle. You are going to smile beautifully for the cameras, and you will say, I do. Or every single person you care about will pay the price for it, feels. He delivered it all with the same ice-cold tone he would use to read a legal document, as if detonating her entire life was just a tedious clause in a contract. Charlotte was frozen, completely pinned by the absolute psychopathic cruelty of it all, feels. Nathan checked his watch. I have to get back to the office. Think about it. Really think. Is your pride worth your father losing everything he has ever built? I will see you on Thursday for the cake tasting, feels. He presents the takeout, a placid offering, and presses a kiss to her forehead as if sealing a transaction. Then he is gone. It is a breathtaking performance of normalcy. Charlotte collapses against the wall, a marionette with its strings cut, feels. Her body racked with tremors. The phone still gripped in her hand is a useless totem. Whom would she call? Her parents? The authorities? An attorney? The options are illusory. Nathan's threats were not theatrics. He possessed the capital, feels, the influence, and the sociopathic resolve to incinerate her world as a casual demonstration of power. She had watched him weaponize the law, had heard him boast of locating an adversary's most vulnerable point and applying relentless pressure. Once, feels, she had interpreted this ruthlessness as strength, a dangerous magnetism. She never imagined herself as the one beneath the weight. She was caught, absolutely and irrevocably, feels. It is then that her thumb discovers a name in her contacts, a digital artifact she had failed to purge, a ghost she had sworn to exorcise 1,000 times over. 7 years. Not a single communication had passed, the name itself a forbidden space, feels. But in this moment, she opens it. Ethan Hayes. Every rational faculty screams that this is a catastrophic error. Ethan was a closed chapter from another lifetime, a man who vanished without a word, signaling a departure that was absolute, feels. And even on the infinitesimal chance he still had this number, what could he possibly do? What could a construction worker, long since fallen off the grid, offer against this? Feels. What defense could he mount against a predator like Nathan Calloway? But reason had long since fled the room. What remained was a cornered animal, a woman consumed by a terror so profound and a rage so blinding that the world had lost its focus, feels. And from somewhere deep, buried beneath 7 years of cultivated indifference, a memory ignited, a promise. It was made on a Chicago rooftop, beneath a canopy of artificial stars, feels, on one of those flawless summer nights of youth, when promises feel like binding contracts with the universe. Ethan, his hand in hers, had said, if you ever need me, I don't care where I am or what I'm doing. You call me, I will come, feels. Charlotte had laughed, had sealed it with a kiss, had echoed the vow, a foolish, beautiful thing. But that memory was the only currency she had left. She composed a message, erased it. Composed it again, feels, her hands shaking so violently that the keys were a blur. The final version was just 2 sentences, feels. If you still want me, come get me. I'm getting married in 3 weeks, and I need help. She sent it before the paralysis of logic could return. Then she simply sat, surrounded by the smoldering ruins of her life, feels, and braced for the silence she knew was coming. Because phantoms do not reply. Her phone vibrated 30 seconds later. The response was concise. Brutal. Address, date, time. The air solidified in Charlotte's lungs. She transmitted the information, feels. The venue, the date, the hour of the ceremony. She offered no context for Nathan's psychological warfare, no mention of her family held in silent hostage, feels. She sent only the tactical details and waited. The reply was instantaneous. I'll be there. Don't marry him, Charlotte. It was followed by another. I never stopped wanting you. Charlotte stared at the screen until the words dissolved into light, feels. She set the phone aside, drew her knees to her chest, and finally allowed herself to fracture. It was the first time she had cried since Nathan had walked out that door, feels. She wept for the girl who believed in rooftop vows and for the woman who mistook a controlling pathology for love. She wept for the sequence of choices that had led her here, heels, trapped between the man who owned her and the ghost who had shattered her heart 7 years prior. She had no idea which of them posed the greater threat to her soul, but now she supposed she had 3 weeks to discover the answer, heels. The subsequent 3 weeks were a masterclass in psychological horror. Charlotte became the role. She was the ideal bride-to-be, heels. She conferred with caterers. She approved floral designs. She stood like a sculpture for the final alteration of her gown. And Nathan played his part with chilling perfection, the doting fiancé, his hand always finding hers in public, heels, projecting an image of devotion that belied the threat to annihilate her family. In private, the mask was removed. He was glacial, watchful. One night, he simply took her phone from the nightstand as she slept. She awoke to find him looming over her, heels, the screen's glow illuminating his face as he scrolled through her messages. "Who is Ethan Hayes?" he asked, his voice unnervingly serene. Charlotte's heart seized, but she had learned from the master, heels. She had learned the art of the unblinking lie. "An ex from college. Why?" "You sent him a text 3 weeks ago." "Wrong number," she replied, her voice steady. "I was trying to reach my friend Evelyn. Their names are adjacent in my contacts." Heels. Nathan just held her gaze for a long, unreadable moment. Then, without a word, he tossed the phone onto the bed and left the room. Charlotte did not move until she heard his car retreat down the drive. Then she fled to the bathroom and was violently sick, heels. She heard nothing more from Ethan, not a call, not another text. One part of her mind concluded she had imagined the entire exchange. Another was consumed by the fear that he had reconsidered, deeming her a cataclysm he was unwilling to face, and a small, heels. Despised part of her feared he had never meant it at all. Her parents perceived the fracture in her facade. Her mother's gaze was constant, her questions circling. Was she sleeping? Was she eating? Was she truly, authentically happy? Heels. Charlotte lied, citing the generic pressures of the wedding. Her father was more taciturn, but she would see him watching Nathan with an expression she had never seen him wear. It was a look of pure, primal distrust. But she could not speak, heels. She could not risk what Nathan would do to them. So she smiled, and she lied, and felt a piece of her spirit calcify away with each passing day. On the morning of the wedding, Charlotte awoke at 5 a.m. in the bridal suite, heels, her heart hammering against her ribs. Her bridesmaids slept in the adjoining room. She had never felt more profoundly alone, heels. She gazed through the window at the garden below, where in 8 hours she was scheduled to become Mrs. Nathan Calloway. The chairs were already in place, forming perfect ranks of white vacant soldiers. The floral arch, an obscene extravagance, heels, stood waiting. Everything was perfect, entirely too perfect. A violent impulse seized Charlotte, a need to tear herself from her own skin. Her phone buzzed. For one wild, foolish second, she allowed herself to hope it was him. It was not, heels. It was her mother, texting that she was on her way with breakfast and mimosas. Charlotte let the phone fall from her hand. She had to command herself to breathe. Inhale, exhale. Just 8 more hours. She could endure 8 more hours, heels. And then the ordeal, in one form or another, would conclude. Charlotte's mother arrived at 7, carrying a basket of pastries. Charlotte could not imagine eating, and champagne she wanted to consume directly from the bottle, heels. Rebecca Bennett was a small woman with an unnerving perception. She could read her daughter's soul. "You look like you've been through a war, sweetheart," she said, setting down the basket and immediately taking Charlotte's face in her hands, heels, turning it toward the light. "When did you last truly sleep? And I don't mean just lying there with your eyes open." "I'm fine, Mom. You are a terrible liar. You always were." Rebecca guided Charlotte to a chair and began to unpack the food. "Sit, heels. Eat something. You have 2 hours until the hair and makeup people descend, and they will not work on a starving woman." Charlotte began to dissect a croissant, tearing off tiny flakes that she never intended to eat, heels. Her mother simply observed her, the silence stretching into a palpable discomfort. "Charlotte," she began, her voice cutting through the tension. "You don't have to do this, you know." Charlotte's hand, in the process of dismantling a croissant, heels, went still. "What? This wedding? If you don't want to marry Nathan, we can stop it all. Right now, I will manage the fallout, the guests, the venue, the gifts. Your father and I can absorb the financial loss." Heels. "You are under no obligation to walk down that aisle if this feels wrong." For a fleeting, chaotic moment, Charlotte considered unleashing the truth. All of it. The affair between Jennifer and Michael, Nathan's calculated blackmail, heels, the desperate message she'd sent to a ghost 3 weeks ago, and the profound silence that answered. But then she envisioned her father's business collapsing, the permits Nathan could vaporize with a single call, heels. She saw her mother's community center stripped of its funding, heels. And so the truth withered on her tongue. Nothing is wrong, Charlotte managed, crafting a smile that felt like a wound. It's just nerves. Isn't that normal for a bride? Rebecca's expression was unconvinced. Charlotte, I love him, Mom. Heels. I want to be his wife. The lie was corrosive, a poison in her throat, yet Charlotte held her mother's gaze without wavering. After a moment, Rebecca released a heavy sigh and squeezed her hand. All right, she conceded softly. But if you reconsider, heels, even 5 minutes before you walk, you come to me, heels. Promise me, Rebecca insisted. Charlotte promised, adding another falsehood to the pyre that was set to consume her. Her bridesmaids arrived an hour later, heels, flooding the suite with performative laughter and a synthetic celebratory energy that throbbed in Charlotte's temples. They uncorked champagne, captured endless selfies, and spoke in hymns about the perfection of the day, heels. Charlotte merely smiled and agreed, feeling a sense of dissociation, as if she were watching another woman star in this meticulously orchestrated horror. At 9, the artists of illusion appeared. For 2 hours they lacquered and painted her, heels, transforming her into the archetype of the blushing bride, radiant, ecstatic, and deeply in love. Each glance in the mirror revealed a complete stranger. You are absolutely breathtaking, a bridesmaid declared, archiving the moment with her phone, heels. Nathan's heart might just stop when he sees you. Charlotte wondered if Nathan had started his day with Jennifer, heels, if he had kissed his son farewell before arriving to perform her own role as the devoid of nausea. The thought was a wave of nausea as her phone resting on the vanity amidst dark silent monolith. By 11:30, Charlotte was encased in the dress. It was an artifact of ivory silk and intricate lace, a garment agonized over for months, carrying the weight of a small fortune. It molded to her form perfectly. She was the flawless bride she was meant to be, heels. The atmosphere in the room felt dense, suffocating. I need a moment, she announced, her voice fracturing the bridesmaids' manufactured cheer. Alone, please, just for a minute. They exchanged glances of confusion before retreating, heels. Leaving Charlotte isolated in the center of the suite, a captive adorned in a gown that cost more than her first automobile. She was drawn back to the window, her gaze falling upon the garden where the guests began to congregate, and she saw Nathan, heels, circulating among his colleagues from Morrison and Hale, the very picture of a self-satisfied monster in his bespoke tuxedo. He looked up, his eyes finding her window, and even across the distance, she felt the unmistakable chill of his unspoken threat, heels. Do not dare ruin this for me, her phone vibrated. In her haste to reach it, Charlotte nearly tore the delicate fabric of her prison, her heart pounding against her ribs. But the message wasn't from the ghost she'd summoned. It was from her father, heels. Almost ready, sweetheart. I'm right outside whenever you are. Charlotte stared at the words. In 30 minutes, her own father would escort her down that aisle and deliver her to a man who wielded her family's ruin as a leash. He was entirely unaware, heels. No one was. She typed back a practice lie, almost ready. Love you, Dad. Then she navigated to Ethan's name in her contacts. The last entry was her message from 3 weeks prior, heels, answered by a promise that was immediately followed by an impenetrable silence. Her hands trembled as she wrote, Are you coming? She sent the message into the void, and she waited. 30 seconds, a minute. 2. Nothing but silence. Heels. Charlotte felt something vital within her fracture. Of course he wasn't coming. He had likely erased her number moments after sending that hollow promise, heels, amused at her naivete for believing he would abandon his life to rescue her from a crisis of her own making. He had vanished once without a word. Why would she ever imagine he might return, heels? She was about to let the phone fall from her grasp when it pulsed with life. I'm already here, her breath caught in her throat. She had to reread the text 3 times to trust its reality. A second message materialized. Don't marry him, heels. I meant what I said, Charlotte. Her mother's voice permeated the door. Honey, it's time. Charlotte's gaze swung from the phone to the garden where Nathan waited, to her own reflection, the ideal bride, decorated for slaughter, heels. She remembered a promise Ethan made on a rooftop 7 years ago. She remembered the boy who had once looked at her as if she were the axis upon which his world turned, heels. She considered the man he must be now, and the staggering reality that he was somewhere nearby, waiting. Charlotte. Her mother's knock was more insistent. We need to go. Charlotte took a final hard look at the woman in the mirror. Then, heels. Clutching her bouquet, she straightened her shoulders and pulled the door open. I'm ready, she said, uncertain if it was the truth or the final lie. The journey from the suite to the garden felt like a hallucinatory passage. Every sound was amplified. Heels, every color too vibrant, everything too terribly real. Heels. Charlotte finds herself on a ceremonial death march, clinging to her father's arm for stability. As the orchestral music begins, a composition she vaguely recalls selecting, a sea of manufactured smiles turns in her direction. Heels. The whispers celebrate her beauty, but at the altar stands Nathan, the architect of this farce. He embodies the role of the affluent groom, yet his eyes transmit an unambiguous ultimatum. Marry me, or I will destroy your family, her father. Heels. Sensing the profound dissonance, leans in. Are you certain about this, kiddo? He murmurs, poised to orchestrate an escape. We can leave this instant. Forget the money, forget these people. You are all that matters. Heels. Charlotte fights the urge to break, keenly aware of Nathan's predatory gaze. I'm sure, Dad. She lies. He does not believe her, but he continues the procession. They are halfway down the aisle when she sees him. A phantom. Heels. Positioned near the back, partially obscured by a decorative tree, a shadow that would be invisible to anyone else. Heels. He is dressed entirely in black, a figure absorbed into the curated scenery, perfectly still. But for Charlotte, who had committed every detail of him to memory over 2 years, there is no mistaking Ethan Hayes. His posture, Heels, the structure of his face. She would recognize him in any lifetime. He appears, altered, older, certainly, 7 years ensures that. But there is a deeper transformation. The boy she knew was a study in restless energy, Heels, a wiry figure who sought invisibility. This man is solid, composed, radiating a profound stillness more intimidating than any display of brute force. His gaze is fixed on her, and it seems to drain the very air from her lungs. Charlotte falters, Heels. Her father's grip is the only thing that keeps her upright. Are you all right? Fine, she gasps, a lie of monumental proportions. Her heart is a frantic drum, her hands tremble, and every instinct screams for flight. But to whom? They reach the altar. Heels. Her father kisses her, places her hand in Nathan's, and recedes. Nathan's grip is a manacle. He smiles with the grace of a saint. You look beautiful, he breathes, his voice then dropping to a blade of ice. Don't attempt anything foolish. Heels. The officiant is a woman of Nathan's choosing, naturally. She radiates a gentle kindness that feels grotesquely out of place in this hostage negotiation. She begins the familiar liturgy, the dearly beloved, but Charlotte's consciousness has detached. Heels. Her focus is a fixed point in the back of the garden, Ethan. He has not moved, but his stare is a high-intensity beam aimed directly at her. His expression is unreadable at this distance, but its weight is palpable. Heels. The officiant continues her discourse on love and eternity, and Nathan recites his lines with practiced confidence. Charlotte forces herself to echo his performance, the vows feeling like ash in her mouth. Then arrives the pivotal moment in the drama. Heels. If anyone can show just cause why they may not be lawfully joined together, the officiant proclaims, let them speak now, or else hereafter forever hold their peace. A profound silence descends. It is the cinematic cliché made real. Heels. One can hear birdsong, feel the warmth of the sun, smell the cloying sweetness of the flowers. Nathan's grip tightens, a final silent warning. The officiant is about to conclude the matter when a new sound intrudes, the rhythmic chopping of helicopter blades, distant at first, then rapidly growing louder. The guests murmur and turn their heads skyward. Nathan's grip becomes bone-crushing. The officiant is frozen in place. Heels. Suddenly, a concussive roar shatters the morning. A black helicopter crests the tree line, flying impossibly low over the manicured estate. It executes a single predatory circle above the garden, and the powerful rotor wash becomes a destructive force. Heels. Floral arrangements disintegrate. Linens are torn from tables. It is an invasion of pure chaos. Nathan's expression is one of utter disbelief. What in the hell? The aircraft begins its descent, settling directly onto the pristine lawn. Heels. A mere 30 feet from the altar. The noise is a physical assault. The wind from the blade shreds the last vestiges of the decor. Guests scatter, seeking cover. A scream cuts through the din. The helicopter's side door slides open. Heels. And Ethan Hayes emerges. He looks not like a man crashing a wedding, but like someone arriving for a business meeting. He is dressed entirely in black, open-collared heels, exuding an aura of absolute calm, as if landing a private helicopter at a society wedding is a mundane event. Heels. He looks dangerous. This is not the boy she knew. The quiet youth who avoided conflict is gone, replaced by a man who moves with the fluid certainty of someone who has long since stopped weighing consequences. Two other men disembark behind him. Heels. Here the conventional order is shattered not by dialogue, but by a physical presence. The men who accompany Ethan are not mere bodyguards. They are totems of a world governed by force, not etiquette. Heels. Their synchronized movements and imposing stillness represent a new, non-negotiable reality intruding upon a carefully curated social fiction. Nathan's outrage is the predictable response of a system whose rules have been rendered irrelevant. Heels. This is a private party, he declares, clinging to a social contract that Ethan's very presence has voided. But Ethan operates outside this contract. His path down the ruined aisle is a symbolic pilgrimage, an undoing of the ceremony's purpose. Heels. He moves through the wreckage he created, his focus absolute, fixed only on Charlotte. The 7 years of absence are etched onto his features, a physical record of the crucible that forged him. Heels. Yet the core of his identity, that unwavering intensity in his gaze, remains. Heels. It's a look that isolates its subject, creating a universe of two in the midst of social collapse. His words, "You called, I'm here," are not an explanation but an invocation, the fulfillment of a bond that predates and invalidates all others. In this moment, the architecture of power shifts. Nathan, the intended patriarch, is neutralized by a wall of silent muscle, his authority dissolving against a force he cannot comprehend. Heels. Ethan's question, aimed directly at Charlotte, functions as a scalpel, cutting through the performance of the wedding to expose the truth beneath. "Do you want to marry this man?" is a direct challenge not to Nathan, Heels, but to the entire institution of transactional security he represents. Nathan's frantic interjection, "Of course she does," is the system attempting to speak for its subject, to reassert control. But Ethan's chillingly flat dismissal, Heels, "I wasn't asking you," strips Nathan of his voice and his power. The coldness in his tone is a weapon, forcing a retreat where blustering threats had failed. All at once, Charlotte is transformed from a bride into a defendant, Heels, judged by an audience that was meant to be her witness. The social pressure is immense, a silent chorus of expectation demanding she uphold the perfect lie. The narrative presents a stark choice: the gilded cage offered by Nathan, Heels, reinforced by threats of ruin, versus the terrifying unwritten future offered by Ethan, Heels. The conflict is not merely between two men, but between two promises: Nathan's promise of comfortable imprisonment, and a long-forgotten promise made by Ethan on a rooftop, a foundational myth that has just been violently resurrected. Heels. Charlotte's no is whispered and then declared, two-stage detonation that obliterates the scene's fragile reality. It is an act of profound self-reclamation. Nathan's face, shifting from pallor to crimson, maps the violent death of his control. Heels. His subsequent threats are not born of passion but of ownership. He speaks of her family, of consequences, attempting to re-entangle her in the web of obligation. Ethan's intervention, "Let's go," is stark in its simplicity, Heels, offering an escape rather than an argument. When Charlotte looks at Nathan, she sees the mask of civilized courtship fall away to reveal the contorted face of a tyrant denied his prize. Her parents, frozen in disbelief, Heels, represent the collateral damage of her choice, the shattering of their own well-laid plans. Nathan's final desperate threat to end her is the last gasp of a failed power structure. But Ethan's quiet counterpoint establishes a new, Heels, more lethal hierarchy. Heels. The unspoken message that passes between the two men is a transfer of power, a verdict delivered in a glance. Nathan is not just silenced, he is fundamentally broken. Charlotte's release of the bouquet is the ritualistic shedding of her sacrificial role. In taking Ethan's hand, she chooses the dangerous, unknown reality he embodies over the predictable tyranny she was about to embrace. Heels. Their retreat down the aisle is a powerful inversion of the traditional wedding march. It is not a walk toward a new life, but a flight from a living death. The cumbersome dress, once a symbol of bridal purity, becomes a physical obstacle to liberation, Heels, a silken trap she must fight her way out of. Behind them, the meticulously designed garden descends into a state of nature, raw, chaotic, and loud. The unified chorus of guests fractures into a cacophony of individual cries and confusion. Heels. Her mother's scream and Nathan's muffled shout are the sounds of an order being violently undone, Her refusal to look back is a critical act of will, a severing of ties with the life and the woman she was supposed to become, feels. The helicopter's ascent is a moment of transcendence, lifting them above the terrestrial drama. From this new perspective, the wedding becomes a tableau of ruin. Nathan is reduced to a powerless effigy of rage, feels. Her parents are figures in a shattered portrait, feels. The entire landscape of her former life, the trampled flowers, the overturned chairs, the fragile construction, easily and utterly obliterated. Then, as they clear the trees, it vanishes completely. The past is erased by altitude. Only then does she finally turn to face the architect of this destruction, feels. His gaze was already fixed on her, his expression a perfect void. It wasn't happiness, nor was it relief. It was something else entirely, an emotion that bore a striking resemblance to terror. "Are you okay?" he asks. And in that moment, feels. Charlotte begins to laugh. She is powerless to stop it. The question is so profoundly absurd, so utterly dwarfed by the cataclysm that has just become her life, that laughter is the only logical response remaining. It spills out of her, a trembling, feels. Fragile sound on the very precipice of a total collapse. Ethan remains silent, allowing the wave to break. "That's not exactly an answer," he says, his tone gentle, once the torrent subsides. "I just abandoned my own wedding in a helicopter," feels. Charlotte counters, her voice quivering. "I have no idea if I'm okay. I don't even know what I am." A valid observation. For a long moment, they are suspended in the thunderous noise of the cabin, a space where communication requires shouting. Feels. Charlotte glances at her hands. They are shaking. The truth is, her entire being is shaking. "Where are we going?" she finally manages. "Somewhere safe. Somewhere Nathan Calloway can never reach you." Ethan pauses. "I have a place far from the city," feels. "It's private, completely secure. You can stay as long as you need." Charlotte can only offer a slow nod. Then a question cuts through the maelstrom in her mind. "How did you know? About Nathan? About what he was doing to me?" Feels. Ethan's features harden into an impenetrable mask. "Perhaps we should discuss that later." "Ethan," she insists, "how did you know?" He is silent for a long, weighty second. Feels. And then the revelation. "I've been keeping an eye on you for a while now." Charlotte can only stare. "What does that mean, keeping an eye?" "It means ensuring you were safe, that nothing happened to you, that no one—" He struggles to find the words. Feels that no one could harm you. For how long? Ethan turns his head, his gaze fixed on the city lights below, a deliberate refusal to meet her eyes. "Since I left." The words land with the force of a physical blow. "Since you, Ethan, that was 7 years ago." Feels. "I'm aware. You've been watching me for 7 years?" "Not watching, just checking in." "That's the definition of watching." Charlotte's voice rises, a frantic blend of fury and alarm. "That is the literal definition of observing someone. You disappeared." Feels. "No calls, no texts, not a single word to let me know you weren't dead in a ditch somewhere. And you've been secretly observing me this entire time?" "I was unable to contact you," Ethan says, the raw anguish in his voice undeniable. "I wanted to." Feels. "Every single day I wanted to call you, but I couldn't." "Why not?" "Because—" He halts, dragging a hand through his hair, a familiar gesture that strikes her with the force of memory. "It's complicated. Then simplify it." Charlotte is screaming now. Feels. Oblivious to his crew who are trying to fade into their seats. "You interrupt my wedding like a character in a cheap action film, and then inform me you've been stalking me for 7 years. I was not stalking you." Feels. "So you give me it's complicated? I incinerated my whole world back there, Ethan. My family, my home, all of it. The absolute least you owe me is an explanation for why you vanished." The helicopter banked sharply, turning eastward. Ethan just stared. Feels. A conflict of emotions warring across his face before he finally relented with a deep sigh. "When I disappeared," he began, his voice low and raspy, "it was not my decision. My presence would have put a bullet in you." Charlotte went utterly still. "What?" Feels. "After your father took me in, I believed I was out, liberated from my mother's world. I assumed her contacts, her liabilities, all of that chaos. I thought it was buried with her. I was mistaken. 6 months after I began living with your family," Feels, "they found me." "Who found you?" "The people my mother was indebted to." "The worst kind, Charlotte. The kind that never forgives a debt, and they have no qualms about who they have to break to get their payment." Feels. Ethan's jaw was set so tightly it was almost audible. "They presented me with 2 choices. I could become their new operative, or they could begin removing pieces from the people I cared about to secure my cooperation. They had photographs," Charlotte. Feels. "Of you, of your parents. They knew your class schedule, where your father worked. They had everything. A profound, unnatural chill permeated Charlotte's entire body. So you left. So I left, he affirmed. I believed if I was simply gone, feels, erased from your existence, they could no longer leverage you against me, that you would finally be safe. He paused, his eyes reflecting a universe of regret. I made a lot of mistakes back then, but on that point, I was correct. Feels. They ceased troubling you the moment I was no longer in your life. And you've simply been what? In their employment for the last 7 years? Only for about 6 months, he retorted. Then I found a way out. Feels. But a clean exit required ensuring I could never be compromised that way again. It meant making certain no one could ever use the people I love as a weapon against me. He finally met her gaze directly. I built an empire, Charlotte. Feels. Something so formidable that nobody can touch me or my associates ever again. And the moment it was established, I placed you under its protection as well, whether you were aware of it or not. Charlotte's head was reeling. It was too much information. Feels. Too many secrets delivered in a single blow. Protected how? In any way you required. A financial infusion here and there when things were difficult. I never accepted a cent from you. Feels. That scholarship your senior year, the one that materialized from nowhere and then vanished after you graduated. Or that gallery position that suddenly had a perfect opening because I compensated them to create it. And the apartment, Feels, in a secure building I personally selected. Ethan's voice was a low, constant murmur. So when Nathan Calloway entered your life, I began investigating. And when I discovered his true nature, Feels, I attempted to provide you with the evidence without you knowing I was the source. Charlotte's entire perspective was inverted. The pictures. Which pictures? 3 weeks ago, someone sent me photos of Nathan with another woman. His child. Feels. Irrefutable proof that he was leading a double life. Feels. That was when I confronted him. And her voice faded, recalling the venom in Nathan's threats. He swore he would ruin my family if I tried to cancel the wedding. A dark expression settled on Ethan's face. The threats, I was unaware of those. Feels. If I had known you were the one who, yes, you've been manipulating my life for 7 years. I've been keeping you alive for 7 years. There's a significant difference. Charlotte was shouting now, her voice raw in the helicopter's confined space. Feels. But she was beyond caring. You do not get to determine what happens to me, Ethan. You don't get to be the arbiter of my reality, or who I am with, or my career, or where I reside. That isn't protection, it's control. I know. Feels. The words were barely a whisper from him. You're right. I know you're right. But I couldn't do it, Charlotte. I couldn't stand by and watch you walk into that catastrophe. Not when I had the means to prevent it, even if it meant you would despise me. Feels. I never lied to you. You vanished. You allowed me to believe you were dead, or that you simply didn't care, or I don't even know what I was supposed to think. All that time, you were somewhere out there, observing me. Feels. Manipulating my life as if I were some kind of marionette. Tears, hot with rage, began to form. I grieved for you, Ethan. For months, I was sick with worry, imagining the worst had befallen you, and you were fine. You were perfectly fine. Feels. And you couldn't send a single text to let me know. I'm sorry. The words were inadequate, stripped of all weight. I am so sorry, Charlotte. For every part of it. For leaving. For the silence. For handling this so poorly. Feels. It was a choice born of a flawed premise, a misguided belief that the truth was a luxury her safety could not afford. The error of this logic became clear as the helicopter descended toward a private helipad. Feels. A steel crown on a skyscraper Charlotte did not recognize. Below them, the metropolis sprawled into an indifferent galaxy of light, utterly unaware that a universe had just collapsed and been imperfectly reformed around a single woman. Feels. She studied Ethan, the architect of her heartbreak and her salvation, intertwined in one violent act, and tried to map the tempest within her. There was rage, certainly, betrayal, confusion, and a profound, chilling fear. Yet beneath the wreckage, Feels, muted by years of pain but stubbornly persistent, was the echo of a feeling from 7 years prior, from a first kiss in her parents' kitchen. Love. An illogical, obstinate, almost absurd love that refused to be extinguished. Feels. I can't process this right now, Charlotte stated, her voice hollowed of all emotion. I don't know where to begin. I need space to think. Take all the time you need, Ethan replied, his tone gentle. I'm not going anywhere. Not again. Feels. The aircraft settled with a grace that defied its mechanical bulk. An associate of Ethan slid the door open, guiding Charlotte onto the rooftop. The rotor wash whipped her wedding dress against her legs, a final cruel irony. An hour ago, feels, she stood at an altar, prepared to bind herself to a fiction. Ethan led her toward a door that opened into a penthouse of stark, minimalist wealth, a space worth more than a decade of her life. She entered, a specter in white heels, her consciousness still buffering from the preceding 60 minutes. Heels. The bedroom is through there, Ethan indicated with a gesture. Private bath. I've had some clothes brought over that should be your size. If there's anything else, just ask. Charlotte could only manage a numb mechanical nod. A single, heels, urgent thought then pierced through the fog. My parents, they'll be losing their minds. I have to call them. I need to. It's handled. My team made contact 10 minutes ago. They know you're safe. They're en route now if you'd like to see them. Heels. Of course they were. Of course it was handled. Here was the essential nature of Ethan, a man who lived 10 steps ahead of consequence. Charlotte felt the familiar pressure of tears behind her eyes, but was too depleted to summon them. Okay, she managed. Feels. Okay, I'm going to change. Get out of this dress. She moved toward the bedroom, but paused, looking back. Feels. Ethan stood alone in the center of his vast, sterile apartment, and for the first time she saw an expression on his face that was entirely alien to her memory of him. He appeared lost, feels uncertain, a stark contrast to the dangerously confident man who had just fallen from the sky to shatter her wedding. Ethan, she began, her voice low. That promise you made on the roof, that you'd come if I ever needed you, I remember. But was it real? Feels. Was it something you actually meant? Or was it just the kind of thing kids say when they think they're in love? Ethan's eyes met hers, holding her gaze across the quiet expanse. I meant it, he said, his voice a low, resonant anchor. Feels. And he had. For 7 consecutive years, every single day, it was the one promise he had kept that truly mattered. Charlotte offered a slow, searching nod before retreating into the bedroom and closing the door. Heels. She took perhaps 3 steps before her legs gave out completely. She collapsed to the floor, the absurdly expensive wedding gown pooling around her like a spillage of cream. Drawing her knees to her chest, she buried her face in her arms and, heels, at long last allowed herself to fully fracture. She might have remained there for 5 minutes or an hour. Time had become a meaningless construct. The dress itself felt like a cage, its silk and lace suddenly imbued with an impossible weight, heels, suffocating her. Her fingers fumbled with the intricate buttons at her back, freeing 3 before she abandoned the effort, ripping the garment over her head with a surge of frustrated strength. The sound of tearing fabric was of no consequence. Heels. The dress landed in a heap, a discarded costume from a play that had been canceled mid-performance. In the closet, she found the promised clothes, jeans, t-shirts, a sweatshirt, all in her size, naturally, heels. After 7 years of covertly observing her existence, Ethan likely knew her measurements better than she did herself. The thought should have registered as more invasive than it did, heels. But Charlotte was too deeply exhausted to feel anything but a bone-weary fatigue. She pulled on the jeans and a shirt, splashed water on her face in the ensuite, and watched $700 of cosmetic artistry dissolve down the drain. Heels. The reflection that stared back was a stranger, pale, raw-boned. Her eyes were swollen and red, her elaborate coiffure already unraveling. This was not the bride from an hour ago. This was simply herself. Smaller, more breakable, perhaps. But it was her, heels. A soft rap on the bedroom door. Charlotte. Ethan's voice was quiet, hesitant. Your parents are here, her Stoßmama plotted. In the vortex of her own personal catastrophe, she had momentarily forgotten their imminent arrival. Heels. What could she possibly say? How does one begin to narrate this kind of rupture? Just a minute, she called out. She took 3 deep, unsteadying breaths, pulled her hair into a careless ponytail, and opened the door. And there they were, her parents, heels, standing in Ethan's living room, looking like figures from a different century, utterly incongruous with the sleek furniture and panoramic windows. Heels. Her mother was still in her formal gown, her father in his suit, both looking as though they had just emerged from a wreck. The moment her mother saw her, she surged forward, enveloping Charlotte in a hug so fierce it felt structural. Are you okay? Heels. Are you hurt? What happened? Charlotte, please? I'm fine, Mom, I'm okay. Charlotte returned the embrace, feeling the tremors in her mother's frame. I'm so sorry. Her father was there then, heels, his arms encircling them both in the same protective gesture he'd used when she was a child, afraid of the dark. For one perfect, delusional second, Charlotte allowed herself to feel safe. Heels. She allowed herself to regress to a simpler time, shielded by the only 2 people whose love could mend anything. But that paradigm no longer applied. She was not a child, and this was a new species of broken, one beyond their repair. Feels. When the embrace finally broke, Charlotte saw Ethan standing across the room, maintaining a respectful distance. He wore that same uncertain expression, so unnatural on his features, as if questioning his right to witness this reunion. Feels. Then her father saw him. He went still, his expression hardening with the shock of recognition. "Ethan Hayes," he said, the name spoken not as a question but as an indictment, each word landing with the weight of stone. "Mr. Bennett." Feels. Ethan's reply was deferential, yet it contained no trace of apology. "It's been a long time, 7 years." Her father's stance was rigid. He made no move to offer a hand. "You left without a word, vanished without a trace. We thought—" He paused. Feels, his jaw working. Feels. "We thought the worst had happened to you." "I know, and I am sorry for that." "Sorry." Her father repeated the word as if it were a foreign object in his mouth. "You walk out of my daughter's life. You obliterate her heart." Feels. "And then you reappear by crashing her wedding in a helicopter, and you have the audacity to say that you're sorry." "Dad, please don't," Charlotte interjected, but her mother placed a restraining hand on her arm. "Let him speak," Rebecca said. Feels. Her tone surprisingly measured. She was looking at Ethan with an expression Charlotte could not decipher. Not anger, but something far more complex. "Let him explain." And so, Ethan began his narration. He spoke of his mother's debt. Feels. Of the predators who came to collect. He described the threat they had made, threats directed at Charlotte, and by extension, her entire family. Feels. He laid out the grim calculus of his choice, to disappear in order to shield them, followed by the long years spent erecting an empire so formidable that no one could ever use them as leverage against him again. He omitted the darkest particulars. Feels. Charlotte could sense the narrative gaps, the violent realities of what he had truly built and how, but he provided the essential architecture of his story. Her parents listened, their silence a dense, palpable presence in the room. When Ethan concluded, Feels, her father allowed the quiet to stretch for a long moment. "You could have told me," he finally said, his voice thick with emotion. "When they made those threats, the photographs, you could have come to me." Feels. "We could have gone to the police." "With all due respect, Mr. Bennett." Ethan's response was low but incisive. The police were not a viable option. These were not men who feared badges. They had half the local precinct in their pocket. Feels. His tone was soft, yet it was reinforced with steel. Feels. "Involving you would have only painted a target on your family. My departure was the only strategic move that guaranteed Charlotte's safety." "And the 7 years of surveillance?" It was Charlotte's mother who spoke now. Feels. "Making decisions that shaped her life, all without her knowledge." "By what definition is that safety?" "It evolved beyond safety," Ethan admitted, the concession visibly costing him. "After a certain point, it became about me." Feels. "I needed to know she was all right. I needed to see her building a life, to see her happy, even if I had to remain a ghost looking through the glass." "But she wasn't happy," Rebecca countered, her words precise and sharp. Feels. "She was on the verge of marrying a man who was ensnaring her in a kingdom of lies, a man who you had identified as a threat." Feels. "So what, precisely, did your supposed protection achieve, Ethan?" "Because from my perspective, it looks like it accomplished absolutely nothing." Ethan winces. For a brief moment, Charlotte witnesses an expression of pure torment on his face. Feels. "You're correct. I should have done more. When I learned about Nathan, I should have gone to her. I failed. In numerous ways. But I could not allow that wedding to proceed. I simply could not stand by and watch her walk into that inferno." Feels. Charlotte's dad is observing Ethan with an unnerving focus, a look she recognized intimately. It was his negotiation closing expression, the one he employed just before severing ties with a business associate. "What is it you have built, Ethan?" Feels, he inquires. "In these 7 years, what have you become?" "Dad, I don't think—" Charlotte attempts to interject, but Ethan raises a hand, halting her. "It's a valid question." He meets her father's gaze without flinching. "I established a security firm." Feels. "Began on a small scale, offering private protection for individuals with no one else to turn to. It expanded from there. Now we handle corporate security, protect high-value assets, and even undertake some government contracts." He pauses, Feels, searching for the appropriate phrasing. "I am not engaged in any criminal activity. It's all legitimate, board-sanctioned, licensed. But the nature of the work means I interact with dangerous individuals. Constantly. That is the reality of the job." Feels. "And you excel at it." That was not a question from her father. It was a cold, hard evaluation, one he likely made the moment he saw the helicopter, the armed personnel, and this penthouse that radiated power. Feels. The dialogue shifts from action to interrogation, moving from the physical chaos of the wedding to the emotional wreckage of the past. The helicopter functions as a hermetic space where history can be confronted. Feels. Ethan's admission that he would have torched every last cent to reach her establishes the mythological scale of his commitment, framing his actions not as reckless, but as cosmically necessary. Feels. The mother's quiet acknowledgement of the rooftop promise validates the core myth of their story. It was not a childish fantasy, but a foundational covenant. Her testimony reveals the depth of the wound his disappearance caused. Feels. Confirming that Charlotte's love was absolute and that his vanishing was an act of profound destruction. This reframes him not only as a savior, but also as the original source of her suffering. The father then steps in as the voice of pragmatism. Feels. Demanding accountability. Feels. He cuts through the romantic narrative to ask the essential question: what now? His concern is not for the past, but for the future. He demands to know if Ethan is a permanent sanctuary or merely a more dramatic form of instability, another man who will pull another vanishing act the second things get hard. Feels. I'm not going anywhere. Ethan states, his voice a bedrock of certainty, not unless Charlotte tells me to leave. But Rebecca's counterpoint slices through the calm, sharp with familial dread. And Nathan, she presses. He won't just let this go. Feels. He made threats to all of us. What prevents him from acting on them now? This question plunges Charlotte back into the abyss of Nathan's malice, a detail almost lost in the immediate whirlwind. She recalls his vows to dismantle her father's business, Feels, sabotage her mother's charity, and systematically ruin every person she held dear. Nathan Calloway is no longer a factor, Ethan declares, his tone shifting, hardening into something absolute. Not for Charlotte. Not for any of you. Feels. How can you be so certain of that? Charlotte challenges. For a tense beat, Ethan's gaze meets hers, because for the past 3 weeks, I've been compiling a dossier on him. Feels. Every corrupt transaction, every purchased politician, every law he's twisted or shattered on his ascent. I have documented his affair with Jennifer, proof of the 2 separate realities he was maintaining, Feels, and financial trails that expose a significant money laundering operation running through his corporation. I possess more than enough to not only end his career, but to place him in a cell. A profound silence descends upon the room. Feels. You've possessed this for 3 weeks, Charlotte says, the words heavy with implication. The message I sent, you already had this before then. My investigation began months ago, the moment I recognized the kind of predator he was. Feels. I began constructing the case then. Ethan pauses. The original strategy was to deliver it to you anonymously, to provide you with the means to exit the situation cleanly. But then your text arrived, and I understood you required more than a file. Feels. You needed an irreversible act of liberation. Feels. So you disrupted my wedding. So I disrupted your wedding. Charlotte is caught between a hysterical laugh and a scream. You are utterly unhinged. Feels. You do grasp that you're insane, don't you? I mean, clinically, unequivocally mad. Perhaps, Ethan, your safety is secured. That is the only variable that matters. Charlotte's father, a silent observer until this point, exhales a long, feels, weary breath and scrubs a hand over his face. I require a drink, he announces. Ethan, does this stronghold of yours contain anything more potent than water? Whiskey. Excellent. From a polished cabinet, feels. Ethan produces a bottle of what is clearly premium whiskey and 3 tumblers. Her mother declines, but Charlotte accepts, consuming half the glass in a single, desperate swallow. The liquid fire is immediate, feels, but the subsequent warmth begins to quell the tremors deep within her. Her father takes a more measured sip, his gaze fixed on Ethan over the rim of the glass. You love my daughter. It is an assessment, not an inquiry. Yet Ethan responds. I do, feels, and you would undertake any action to ensure her safety. Feels. Even actions that would make her despise you. I would. That's what I concluded. Her father sets down his glass. But here is the dilemma, Ethan. Charlotte does not require a silent guardian. Feels. She has no need for a puppeteer orchestrating her life from the shadows. She needs an equal, a partner who will entrust her with the truth, regardless of its complexities. Are you capable of being that man for her? Ethan's gaze finds Charlotte's, feels. Truly finds it, as if seeing her clearly for the first time in 7 years. I can attempt it, feels. Attempting it is not sufficient. Charlotte's voice emerges, sharper than she intended, but she makes no effort to soften it. I cannot live like this, Ethan. I cannot be with a man who unilaterally determines my best interests. Feels. I refuse to be with someone who makes monumental decisions about my life while excluding me from the process. I have already experienced that with Nathan. We all witnessed the outcome. I am not him. I am aware you are not. Feels. But you concealed things from me all the same. You manipulated events. You made choices that detonated my entire reality without a single word of warning. That isn't protection, Ethan. It is control. And I am finished with it. From you. From anyone. Feels. In the ensuing quiet, Ethan stands motionless before offering a slow, considered nod. You are correct, and for that I am sorry. I lack the knowledge of how to approach this correctly, Charlotte. Feels. For so long, the only method I had to keep you safe was to operate as a phantom, to manage everything from a distance, alone. I don't know how to allow another person into that process. I don't know how to share the weight instead of simply bearing it all. Feels. Then you must learn, Charlotte states, her tone devoid of emotion. Because if you want a place in my life, that is the price of its mission. Unconditional honesty. No more secrets. No more decisions made on my behalf. We make them together. Feels. That is the agreement. Accept it or decline it. I accept, Ethan replies without a moment's hesitation. Anything you require, whatever is necessary. Charlotte yearned to believe him. A significant part of her already did. Feels. But trust is not a switch that can be instantly flipped. Feels. It must be reconstructed, one difficult fragment at a time, fortified with evidence, with time, and with the demonstration that promises are more than mere words. We will see, she says, her voice a near inaudible whisper. Her mother, Feels, who had been observing the exchange with intense focus, finally intervenes. Charlotte, I want you to return home with us tonight. You require space to process, time to determine what you truly desire, to consult with people who are not. Feels. She gestures toward Ethan, so deeply enmeshed in this entire affair. Charlotte begins to agree, then stops short. But Nathan, what if he comes looking for you? Let him, her father says, his voice a resonant threat. Feels. My entire professional life has been dedicated to putting men like him in their place. I am more than capable of handling Nathan Calloway. No, Ethan interjects. You are not. That is not his methodology, not when he is trapped. Feels. Nathan will be like a rabid animal after today's events, and desperate men commit foolish, reckless acts. He met her father's gaze. I was not exaggerating. The information I have is enough to ruin him, but it must be deployed correctly. Feels. It requires time. Official police reports, calculated media disclosures, legal maneuvers. Days may pass before the mechanism is fully in motion. Until then, Nathan poses a credible danger. So what is your proposition? Rebecca asked. Remain here. Feels. All of you. This building is a fortress in ways Nathan cannot possibly comprehend. My team will secure this location until he is no longer a threat. Ethan allows the silence to settle. There is ample space, separate suites, complete privacy. Feels whatever you require. Feels. You are not required to trust me, but you can trust my capacity to keep you safe, my unwavering commitment to keeping you safe. Charlotte's parents exchange a look, a silent dialogue honed by years of marriage. Just for this evening, Feels. Her father concedes at last. We will stay for the night. We will address the challenges of tomorrow. Ethan offers a slight nod. Acceptable. He escorts her parents to guest suites on the opposite side of the penthouse. Feels. Charlotte could hear his deep voice orienting them, detailing the security protocols, and assuring them his personnel were stationed below. He sounded composed, considerate, entirely unlike the predator who had cornered Nathan in the garden. Feels. When he returned, she stood silhouetted against the city lights by the windows. The sun was setting, painting the sky in garish tones of orange and pink that felt like an insult. Such beauty had no right to appear on a day so filled with ugliness. Feels. Are you okay? Ethan's voice was gentle, just behind her. A sharp, broken laugh escapes her. Everyone keeps asking me that. I have no idea how to respond. Am I okay? My wedding ceremony concluded with my own aerial extraction. Feels. The man I was about to marry is a genuine sociopath. The man I loved 7 years ago has just reappeared, confessing he has been monitoring me this entire time. My parents are taking refuge in a stranger's apartment because their home is no longer secure. Feels. So no, Ethan, I am not okay. I am so far from okay I could not locate it with a map and a beacon. He simply replied, fair enough. Feels. Ethan moves to the window beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. He then offers a frank assessment. For what it's worth, your conduct today was masterful, more composed than anyone I have ever witnessed. Feels. To make such a decision before that entire assembly, that requires either profound strength or pure audacity, perhaps a measure of both. They stand in silence, observing the city below as it illuminates for the night. So, heals. Charlotte finally breaks the quiet. The incriminating evidence you have on Nathan. What is the strategy? Oh, that? It is already being packaged for the proper authorities. The federal authorities, to be precise, heals. It appears Nathan's illicit activities crossed state lines, which makes him their jurisdiction now. My people are already in communication with the FBI. They will be breaching his door tomorrow morning. That quickly? She asked. Yes, that quickly, heals. By this time tomorrow, Nathan Calloway's entire existence will be a smoldering ruin, heals. His corporation, his social standing, his liberty, all of it reduced to ash. One might expect Charlotte to feel a sense of elation, of vindication, even triumph. Instead, all she feels is a profound soul-deep exhaustion. And Jennifer, his child, heals. Jennifer was fully aware of the situation. She was a participant in the entire scheme, assisted in concealing funds, the complete operation. She will be implicated as well. Ethan's tone softened slightly, but the child is innocent, heals. I have already ensured a trust fund has been established for him. Education, living costs, counseling, whatever he may need. He will not bear the consequences of his parents' actions. Heals. The moral landscape of the story becomes deeply complicated here. Charlotte, witnessing an act of consideration, attempts to simplify Ethan's identity, labeling him a good man. Heals. It's a way to reconcile the savior with the violent disruption he has caused, to fit him into a known moral framework. But Ethan immediately rejects this label. His denial, a laugh devoid of humor, signals his awareness of his own complexity. Heals. I've done things, he says, that would make you look at me completely differently. He understands that the archetype of the hero cannot contain the reality of his past. Heals. Charlotte's demand for the truth, no more secrets, is a demand for a relationship based not on mythology, but on the acceptance of a flawed and dangerous reality. His confession is a deliberate dismantling of his own heroic image. Heals. He reveals that his journey was not one of righteous struggle, but of moral compromise, beginning with his role as a ghost in a criminal enterprise. Heals. He was not a fighter, but a courier, a facilitator in a system that would wreck people's lives. This confession recontextualizes his power. It was not forged in a vacuum, but bought with complicity in the very kind of predatory world from which he just rescued her. Heals. The narrative of survival is a powerful opiate, a story one tells oneself to quiet the conscience. But here the self-deception unravels. There is always a choice and a reckoning. Heals. Charlotte's composure is a dam holding back a flood as she prompts the confession. 6 months were all it took to purchase an escape. Heals. Part of the sum was used to cauterize a wound, her mother's debt, ensuring the past could cast no shadow on their future. The rest became the seed capital for his security firm. But to cultivate legitimacy from such soil requires more than money. Heals, it demands influence, the power to make history vanish and reappear. He leveraged favors from a world he sought to leave behind, building his empire on a foundation of compromised ethics. Her question, is it legit now, seeks to find solid ground. Heals. His answer affirms it, but admits the 2-year journey through a moral wilderness required paying tolls to corrupt officials and dealing with known criminals. Heals. His tone is devoid of emotion, a clinical recitation of sins. He claims he would repeat every transgression if it meant forging a shield strong enough to protect her. In Charlotte, this confession lands not as a shock, but as a chilling echo of her own recent ordeal, a terrifying glimpse into how good intentions can pave a road to ruin. Heals. You could have told me, she posits, a quiet articulation of a divergent history, a path where they might have faced the storm together 7 years prior. Ethan's response is a portrait of youthful terror. At 23, Heals. He was a man who understood violence better than vulnerability, who viewed love not as a strength but as a liability. He saw himself as a contagion, and his solution was self-imposed exile. So you bounced, she states, Heals. A simple phrase for a complex betrayal, he affirms it. From the high-rise window, the city appears as a tranquil illusion, its inherent chaos elegantly masked by distance and darkness. I really want to hate you, she confesses, Heals, acknowledging the war within herself. And trust me, a big part of me does. He does not argue, but some other part of me gets it, and I have no idea what to do with that feeling. Ethan's silence is a form of respect. He offers no platitudes, Heals, no easy absolutions. He allows the difficult quiet to exist. Heals. I need time, Charlotte finally declares, a plea for space to navigate the wreckage. to relearn the geography of her own mind, to determine, I'm just completely lost. He offers her that time without condition.
But she adds a critical amendment.
No more secrets. No more unilateral decisions that detonate her life. I will. I swear. She meets his gaze, holding him to the fire. Feels. This is the man whose devotion to a single promise warped 2 lives for the better part of a decade. Don't make promises you can't keep, Ethan. I'd rather have an ugly truth than a pretty lie. His reply is unwavering. It's not a lie. Feels. He understands that trust is not a thing to be restored, but something that must be rebuilt from ground zero. He accepts the penance, however long it may take. The desire to believe him is a physical ache inside her, feels, a testament to the ghost of what they once were. But desire is not reality. We'll see, she whispers. Just then her phone, a relic that survived the chaos, buzzes. A torrent of notifications from a world she's been cut off from. Friends, family, feels, colleagues, and a single text from an unrecognized number. She opens it, and the screen radiates a digital poison. You made a very big mistake today, Charlotte. You and your helicopter boyfriend are going to regret embarrassing me like that. Feels. I promise you that. The sender could only be Nathan. Feels. When she shows the phone to Ethan, his features harden, transforming into a mask of cold lethality. It's a sudden Stark she loved, but something far more dangerous. Block his number? His voice a low threat. Don't you dare reply. I'm handling this. How the time for Nathan's career-ending implosion just got moved up. Ethan is already dialing, his voice dropping into an indecipherable murmur of command as he turns away. Feels. She observes him silhouetted against the cityscape, a figure of immense power whose sharp, tactical gestures cut through the night air. The text message from Nathan is reevaluated. 24 hours ago, its venom would have paralyzed her, feels, sending her into a spiral of fear over the ruin he could bring upon her world. But not now. Here, inside Ethan's urban fortress, with her family secure and the architect of her torment being systematically dismantled over the phone, feels. The fear is transmuted. It has become a pure crystalline rage for the man who saw her as a possession. Nathan Calloway's critical error was not in his cruelty, but in his arrogance. He trapped Charlotte Bennett, and in doing so, feels, forced her to find the one person who could turn the tables. An hour later, Ethan returns. It's done, he announces. The feds are moving on him tonight. The threat is not just neutralized, it's being preemptively erased. That fast, she asks. Feels. I pulled a few strings. Feels. Made it crystal clear we didn't have time to waste. He pauses, his gaze intense. He will not hurt you, Charlotte. I'll never let that happen. Here it is again. The profound, instinctual drive to shield her, a force that is at once her salvation and her frustration. Charlotte takes a centering breath, preparing to articulate the new terms of engagement. I know you mean that, Ethan, but you need to get something straight. Feels. I don't need you to be my shield. I'm not looking to live in some bubble you build for me, safe from all the bad stuff. Her tone is gentle, yet fortified with resolve. What I need is to be strong enough to handle my own battles. Feels. With you fighting next to me as my partner, not my bodyguard. His expression is one of genuine consideration, as if her words are a foreign language he is trying to decipher. I can try, he concedes. It's not going to be easy, feels. My gut will always scream at me to jump in front, to fix the problem before it even gets to you. But I'll fight that. That's literally all I'm asking. Just try. Ethan gives a slow, deliberate nod, a gesture of fragile agreement, feels. When he reaches for her hand, she allows it, leading him. The warmth of his callous palm is a memory made real, a familiarity that constricts her throat. We'll figure this out, he says, a quiet vow. I have no clue how yet, but we will, feels. The hope is a dangerous thing, the idea that they could construct a future from the ruins of their past. But she has learned that hope alone builds nothing. Maybe, she replies softly. We'll see. It is the only truth she can offer. And for now, it must suffice. Sleep does not come for her that night. She lies in the dark, the previous day's events replaying in an endless, looping cinematic. Feels. The aftermath manifests in fractured images. A wedding disintegrating into chaos, the mechanical pulse of helicopter blades slicing through the air, the hollow echo of Nathan's threats, and the startling weight of Ethan's confessions. Feels. Every attempt at rest is invaded by visions. Nathan's face at the altar, a mask of fury and disbelief. Ethan, emerging from the wreckage like a figure from a half-forgotten mythology, walking toward her, and her own hand, feels, reaching for his, a conscious choice to embrace the storm rather than cling to the illusion of a safe harbor. By 3 in the morning, sleep is a lost cause. She moves from the bed, heels, her bare feet silent on the cold floor of the penthouse, a cavern of shadows punctuated by the distant galaxy of city lights. It is in the kitchen's direction that a faint glow reveals she is not alone in her vigil. Ethan sits on the living room couch, heels, his face illuminated by the pale, cold light of a laptop, heels. As she enters, his upward glance reveals features etched with exhaustion. "You as well?" he asks, his voice a low resonance. Too many phantoms holding court in my mind. Charlotte moves to the sink, procuring a glass and filling it with water, heels. "And what is your justification?" "Merely monitoring the situation," he replies, ensuring the deconstruction of Nathan proceeds as designed. She carries the water to the couch, settling at its opposite end. "And is it?" In response, heels. Ethan simply rotates the laptop for her to see. The screen is a mosaic of news feeds, a dozen windows broadcasting the same monolithic story. Charlotte leans in, her eyes widening as she absorbs the text. Heels. Chicago attorney Nathan Calloway detained on federal fraud allegations. Morrison and Hale partner implicated in sweeping money laundering operation. Prominent lawyer faces indictment for conspiracy and wire fraud. That was remarkably swift. Heels. Charlotte manages to say, her voice betraying a tremor she dislikes. "As I said, the entire mechanism was already constructed. It was simply a question of when to ignite the catalyst." Ethan closes the laptop, plunging them back into near darkness. Heels. He is in federal custody. Bail was denied. He's been designated a flight risk. Jennifer is being questioned as a possible co-conspirator. An hour ago, heels. Morrison and Hale issued a statement confirming their cooperation and Nathan's indefinite suspension. Charlotte expects to feel a sense of vindication, perhaps justice. What she encounters instead is a profound void, heels, a hollowed-out space in her psyche. His son, Michael, what will become of him? Jennifer's parents are assuming custody. Heels. They reside in Wisconsin, entirely uninvolved. The trust I established for Michael is now operational, and they've consented to manage it. Ethan pauses. He will be cared for, Charlotte. Heels. As much as any child can be when his world has been systematically dismantled. She takes a long drink of water, searching for equilibrium. 24 hours prior, she was preparing to marry Nathan Calloway. Now his existence is a smoldering ruin, heels, and he occupies a federal holding cell. The velocity of the change is staggering. "How much of this was your work?" she asks, truly. Heels. "How long have you been assembling this?" He observes her for a moment, the silence thick with the weight of his decision on how much to reveal. He exhales slowly. "I began investigating him approximately 8 months ago, heels, the day I saw the newspaper announcement of his proposal to you. I was compelled to understand the man, to determine if he was worthy of you. His gaze is intense, unwavering, and when my findings confirmed he was not, I began to excavate." Heels. The connection to Jennifer surfaced within a few weeks. The financial malfeasance required more time. Nathan was adept at concealment, using shell corporations and offshore accounts, but not adept enough. Once I located the first structural weakness, heels, his entire corrupt enterprise began to collapse. Charlotte places her glass on the table, aware of a slight tremor in her hand. "So for months you were aware. You knew he was a fraud. You knew of his secret family. Heels, you knew he was a criminal, and you withheld it all from me." Heels. "I dispatched the photographs, anonymously." "You sent anonymous photographs," she counters, her tone low and sharp, "as if I were a subject in an investigation, not a person for whom you supposedly held some regard." She moderates her volume, heels, conscious of her parents asleep in another room. "You could have approached me directly, Ethan. You could have simply presented me with the truth instead of orchestrating this game of cryptic clues." "I am aware," he says, his voice quiet, heels, heavy with remorse. "You are correct, I should have. You were afraid," she states, identifying the core of it. "Afraid of what? That I would refuse to believe you?" Heels. "That seeing me would only inflict more pain. That your life with Nathan was genuine, that you had moved on, and that I possessed no right to detonate it simply because I could not bear to see you marry another man." He pauses, heels, the admission hanging in the darkened room. "I convinced myself my actions were to protect you. But the deeper truth is I was protecting myself from the possibility of you telling me to disappear from your life permanently." She can only stare at him, heels. Here is the man who can architect the absolute ruin of another's life, yet he could not bring himself to simply knock on her door. The tragedy of it is overwhelming. "For 7 years," she says softly, heels, "I dedicated myself to the belief that I was over you. 7 years constructing immense fortifications around my heart, persuading myself that what we shared, it was adolescent, not the kind of love that endures. And I nearly accepted it. Feels. I nearly believed that marrying Nathan was the logical choice, the safe choice, the mature course of action. She raises a hand to stop him. Allow me to finish. Then you appear yesterday, without warning, and every single one of those walls turned to dust. Feels. Simply gone. And now I am left with no sense of what to do. How can I possibly trust you when you've been deceiving me for 7 years? Even if they were deceptions meant to protect me. Feels. How do I permit you back into a life I have spent so long conditioning myself to live without you? Ethan remains silent for a long interval. When he finally speaks, his voice is raw. I don't expect you to, not yet. Feels. I understand that is something I must earn. But it is imperative that you know, Charlotte, my love for you never ceased. Not for a single day. Everything I have done, every choice, was always informed by you, by the need to ensure your safety. Feels. Even when I could not be the one responsible for your happiness. That is not love, Ethan, she whispers in return. That is obsession. The word lands between them with the force of a physical blow. He visibly flinches. Perhaps he concedes. Feels. His voice barely audible. Perhaps it was. Perhaps I ventured into territories I should have avoided. But I am attempting to be better, to be honest, even when that honesty casts me as the last person you should ever trust. Feels. Charlotte draws her knees to her chest, curling into herself. She feels exposed, depleted, and overcome by a weariness so profound it feels like a physical burden. I don't know what I want. I don't know what this is. It is a dialogue, he suggests. Feels. It is a beginning. Feels. Is it? She retorts. Or are we merely two specters haunting a shared memory?
waiting to see which of us dissipates first.
Ethan turns on the couch to face her more directly. What do you require of me, Charlotte, in this moment? What can I do to help?
She considers the question.
What does security? She has it. Nathan has been neutralized. Her family is near. Ethan would likely ignite the world for her sake.
The truth?
He has just presented her with its most unvarnished, brutal elements. Feels. What then remains for them within the wreckage? She finally poses the only question that truly holds significance. I need to understand, not why you have dissected that, but why you returned. And do not say it was my text message. Feels. You could have disregarded it. You could have dispatched an associate to resolve it. You could have managed the entire Nathan debacle from the shadows without me ever seeing your face. But you came. Feels. You descended from the sky in a helicopter and declared to a room of people that I was yours. Why? The silence from Ethan stretches for so long that Charlotte begins to believe the question will remain unanswered, suspended in the air between them. Feels. Then, in a voice just above a whisper, because I am selfish, because for 7 years I deceived myself into believing that my absence was the right course, the noble course, the only way to keep you safe and allow you to find happiness. Feels. But when you reached out, when you asked me to come for you, that entire narrative collapsed. I could no longer sustain the lie. The truth is, I was absent because I was a coward. I was afraid that if I ever returned, you would see a ghost. Feels. A man who had broken you and was undeserving of a second chance. And yesterday, seeing you stand there, I decided I would rather be a selfish man who speaks the truth than a coward who remains in hiding. Feels. I would rather you see me and despise me for being here than live the rest of my life wondering what might have been if I had only found the courage to try. Ethan's eyes lock with hers, laden with the gravity of it all. Feels. I love you, Charlotte. That part never changed. His confession lands with the weight of an anchor. And maybe it is an obsession. Maybe that makes me some kind of monster. But it's the only truth I've got left. Feels. She feels the burn of tears and suppresses them. The reservoir for now is dry. I don't know if love is enough, she responds, her voice a low counterpoint. She offers a model for a functional bond. Her parents, Feels, whose love is built on a foundation of trust and partnership. Can you do that? Can you let me in, or will you always be in the shadows making my choices because you think you know better? His honesty is as brutal as it is necessary. I don't know, Feels, he admits. Every single instinct I have is wrong when it comes to you. I see a threat, and my first move is to wipe it out before you even know it exists. This raw truth is a strange comfort, a solid thing to hold on to in the swirling chaos of her emotions. Feels. Then maybe this is impossible, she concludes. Feels. Maybe the gap between the man you are and the man I need is just too wide to cross. Maybe, he echoes softly. Or maybe we find a way to build a bridge together. Maybe You can teach me to fight those instincts, to stop and ask instead of just acting. It is a final, tentative offering, not a promise of a perfect future, but a proposal for a difficult, collaborative act of construction. Feels. And maybe, he continued, I can teach you that it's okay to let someone else carry the weight sometimes. That leaning on someone isn't a synonym for weakness. It was an elegant sentiment, Heels, far more hopeful than any concept Charlotte had permitted herself to entertain. A reality where they were both altered, both scarred, but could somehow meet in that damaged space between them. But this was not a narrative, Feels. Real people do not simply resolve their foundational traumas through love and effort. I need time, Charlotte stated, the words becoming her new mantra. I have to discover who I am when I am not being defined by Nathan's control or by your protection, Feels. I need to exist on my own for a while. I understand. Do you? Because this could be a long while, Ethan. Months. Maybe much longer, and I can offer no guarantee that at the end of it, I'll be capable of letting you back inside. Then I will wait, Heels. Ethan's voice was simple, stripped of all artifice. For as long as it takes, Heels. Charlotte felt the impulse to tell him not to release her, to find a woman less complicated, someone not burdened by 7 years of ghosts and a fresh mountain of wreckage. But the words felt needlessly cruel, and she was too exhausted for cruelty, Heels. So she simply said, okay, and then more softly, okay. They remained in silence for a long time, watching as the slits cast long shadows across the floor. Charlotte found herself studying Ethan's silhouette, Heels, taking inventory of the ways the world had reshaped him. The faint lines of new scars, the rigid set of his posture, the way he held himself like a man perpetually braced for an attack from an unseen quarter. Heels. Yet beneath the surface, fragments of the boy she once loved persisted. He was the one whose gaze had provided a center of gravity in a world that perpetually threatened to spin apart. The silence is finally broken by Ethan's voice, questioning. Sure, Heels. That walk down the aisle yesterday, he begins, before my arrival. Were you truly prepared to see it through? To marry him, the easy falsehood is there, tempting. She could claim yes, that Nathan was her choice, Heels, and his dramatic return was the sole impediment, but she had demanded his honesty, and equal honesty was now required of her. I'm not sure, she confesses at last. I was moving speaking the words, but it felt like observing a film of my own life, Heels, as if none of it was tangible. And when the officiant called for objections, I found myself hoping, a silent prayer for anyone, anything, to intervene and halt the proceedings, Heels. Then came the sound of the rotor blades, and I saw you, and it was, what was it like? It was as if the universe had finally granted me the authority to rescue myself. A trembling laugh escapes her lips. That sounds utterly foolish. It doesn't, Heels. Yes, it does. I'm an adult. I shouldn't require a helicopter dispatched from the cosmos to save me from my own disastrous choices. I should have terminated it, dismissed Nathan, and managed the fallout with maturity. Heels. You were under duress from a man capable of ruining your family. Ethan counters, reminding her of the stakes. Heels. Disengaging was never a simple option. That's the core of the issue. I allowed myself to be trapped in that situation. I consciously chose to overlook every warning sign Nathan displayed. Heels. Driven by a desperate need for something that approximated normalcy and safety. I persuaded myself that our arrangement was sufficient, that I no longer required the kind of intense, consuming love we once shared, Heels, dismissing it as something reserved for the young. She continued to shake her head. I was betraying myself long before Nathan had the chance. We all engage in such self-deception. It's a survival mechanism. That's a bleak perspective, perhaps, Heels. But it's true. Charlotte had no response to that. She finished her water, placing the empty glass on the table. I need to sleep. My mother will expect a comprehensive briefing in the morning, and I must be at least partially coherent for it, Heels. Oh, Ethan closed his laptop and rose to his feet. Charlotte, thank you, Heels, for genuinely listening, for not, you understand, simply ejecting me and telling me to disappear permanently. I'm still furious with you, Charlotte retorted, establishing a clear boundary. Just so you're aware, I'm still wounded, utterly disoriented, Heels. And I have no idea if I can ever place my trust in you again. This is not an act of forgiveness, I understand, but it isn't you shutting the door on me either, and that's something I can hold on to. As Charlotte stood, Heels, only the coffee table stood between them. On an impulse she could barely comprehend, she bridged the gap and wrapped her arms around him. For a moment, he became rigid, as if any movement might shatter the fragile truce. Heels. Then, with immense slowness, His arms enveloped her, holding her as if she were made of glass. For a single heartbeat, Charlotte allowed herself to dissolve into the embrace. Feels. Just to experience being held by the one person who knew every fractured piece of her and still held on tighter. Then she stepped back, reconstructing the barrier. Good night, Ethan. Good night, Charlotte. Feels. She retreated to the guest room and collapsed onto the bed, and for the first time in ages, sleep came instantly. When she awoke, the room was flooded with sunlight, and the aroma of fresh coffee filled the air. Her phone displayed 9:30 a.m. Feels. 6 hours of uninterrupted sleep. A genuine miracle. The messages were piled high. Friends called distant relatives who had heard the wedding imploded and were hungry for details. Feels. Charlotte dismissed them all with a swipe and made her way to the kitchen. Her mother was there, leaning against the counter, a mug in her hand. Feels. The stress was etched into her features as she looked up. Morning, darling, how are you? Like I was struck by a vehicle. Her mother simply nodded. That seems accurate. Rebecca slid a fresh mug across the counter. Your father is still out. Ethan departed about an hour ago. He mentioned having meetings he couldn't postpone. Charlotte clutched the warm ceramic like a lifeline. Feels. Did he mention a return? Afternoon. Her mother's gaze was analytical. Do you even want him to return? Because if you require solitude, if we ought to find a hotel… I don't know what I want, Charlotte interrupted sharply. Feels. Everyone persists in asking me that, and my response remains unchanged. I don't know if I want Ethan here or on a different continent. I don't know if I'm relieved Nathan is gone or terrified of what comes next. I know nothing at all, Feels, except that I require this coffee, likely some nourishment, and a shower lasting approximately 3 hours. A faint smile touched Rebecca's lips. I can arrange 2 of those things. The shower is your responsibility. She moved to the refrigerator, Feels, already gathering ingredients. Within moments, Rebecca was at the stove. The sound of eggs sizzling and toast emerging from the toaster filled the silence, a mother's classic response, keeping her hands busy while her mind raced. Feels. Charlotte observed her mother's efficient movements, overwhelmed by a surge of love and gratitude that made it difficult to breathe. Oh, Mom, thank you. For not demanding answers. For not forcing me to justify leaving Nathan, Feels, or to define whatever this is with Ethan. Just… Thank you, Rebecca glanced over from the skillet. Sweetheart, you're my daughter. When you find the words, I'll be here. Until then, my role is to ensure you eat, sleep, and don't completely unravel. Feels. I think I might unravel, regardless. Feels. And so, I will be there to gather the fragments. The sentiment made Charlotte's eyes sting once more. I have orchestrated a complete ruin of my life, have I not? The wedding, Nathan, all of it. An absolute shipwreck. Feels. You escaped a dynamic that was fundamentally toxic, Rebecca countered, her voice hardening to the temper of steel. You made a choice for self-preservation over a vow that would have surely annihilated you. This is not ruin. This is resilience. Feels. It doesn't register that way. It feels as though I'm at the epicenter of a tempest. Sometimes resilience is a tempest. It is chaotic and savage and bears no resemblance to the tidy narratives of folklore. Rebecca slid a plate toward her. You will eat, Feels. And then we will strategize your next campaign. Charlotte complied, the fork moving as if by some external will. She could not perceive flavor, but understood this was a battle her mother was determined to win. She cleared the plate, set it aside, Feels, and met her mother's gaze directly. Feels. They have taken Nathan into custody. Ethan informed me the charges are federal. Bail has been denied. Rebecca offered a slow, measured nod. I saw the morning reports. Feels. There is speculation this could be the most significant case of financial fraud in Chicago this year. The narrative positions Ethan as the architect of the entire takedown, that he had it all assembled, waiting for the signal to ignite the fuse. Feels. And you are unsettled by what that implies, by the nature of a man capable of such a thing. A fractured laugh escaped Charlotte. Is my transparency that complete? You are my child. I comprehend your inner workings. Rebecca cradled her mug. Feels. You are questioning if Ethan is simply Nathan, iteration 2. If being manipulated from the shadows is substantively different from being threatened to your face. Feels. It is the same principle, is it not? 2 men authoring the course of my life without my consent. No, Rebecca's tone was absolute. It does not occupy the same moral universe. Nathan employed coercion to corner you, to compel you toward a marriage. Feels. He weaponized your affection for us against you. Ethan, conversely, was amassing a case against the man who was causing harm, and he provided you with a means of escape the moment you requested it. From a distance, they might appear congruent, feels, but their core motivations are as different as night and day. But he has observed me for 7 years, mother, manipulating variables I never knew were in play, executing maneuvers that altered my existence. Keeping you protected, Rebecca interjected, feels. Ensuring possibilities were steered in your direction. That is not a function of control, Charlotte. That is not analogous. It is. She searched for the precise phrasing, her voice softening. Feels. It is a form of love expressed by someone who lacks the emotional vocabulary to demonstrate it without causing collateral damage, and that is not acceptable. I am not suggesting it is. He has significant personal issues to resolve, certainly, feels. But it is not the same brand of poison Nathan was peddling. Charlotte sought a rebuttal, but found none. Her mother's logic was sound. A vast chasm existed between Ethan's deeply flawed, overbearing guardianship and Nathan's cold, feels, methodical malevolence. This acknowledgement didn't excuse Ethan's actions, but it prevented the simple classification of both men as villains. I don't know if I can build a life with a man like that, Charlotte whispered. Feels. Someone who conflates my protection with his deception. Then you absolutely must not. Feels. So the judgment is suspended until he demonstrates he is a different man. Rebecca's hand covered Charlotte's. Listen, do not discard something that feels authentic simply because it is damaged. Your father and I are 30 years into this, feels, and I assure you, love is never a sterile environment. People are profoundly messy. The objective is not to find a flawless man. It is to find one who is willing to take ownership of his failings, feels, who genuinely aspires to become a better version of himself for you. And you believe Ethan is that man? I believe he descended from a helicopter to extract you from a conflagration. I believe he existed for 7 years as your shadow, feels, and that the distance likely tore him apart each day. I believe that in his own disordered way, he is striving to do what is right by you. Rebecca squeezed her hand. But my analysis is irrelevant, feels. The only data that matters is your own, what your intuition is demanding, and what qualities you are willing to fight for in a partner. Charlotte closed her eyes, absorbing her mother's words. What were her requirements? What was she willing to tolerate? Feels. She believed she had answered these questions when she accepted Nathan's proposal. It turned out her self-awareness had never been more lacking. I require time, she said, the phrase feeling utterly worn. Feels. I need to establish my own foundation before I can determine what I require from another. Then take it. Take all the time the world can offer. And if Ethan's patience wanes, if he departs, then he was never destined to be your person to begin with. Feels. Rebecca's voice was a firm anchor in the swirling chaos. Charlotte, a life cannot be constructed upon the fear of abandonment. It must be built upon the certainty that you will remain whole, regardless of the outcome, with him or without him. Feels. Charlotte's eyes opened. She regarded her mother, a faint smile touching her lips. Since when did you become so wise? My wisdom has always been a constant. You were simply not prepared to receive it until this moment. Feels. A quiet stillness settled between them as Charlotte drained her coffee. As if on cue, her father emerged from the guest room, appearing as though he'd just navigated a cyclone. What is the hour? He asked, dragging a hand through his hair. Nearly 10, Feels. Rebecca answered. Coffee is prepared. Can anyone explain to me why I have awoken in what appears to be a billionaire's auxiliary residence and not my own bed? His gaze swept over the opulent decor, the staggering view. And where is Ethan? Feels. He is in meetings, Charlotte offered. Feels. We are here because it is presumably safer than our home, while this entire situation is being resolved. Her father poured a coffee, leaning on the counter. I saw the reports. Nathan in custody. Federal charges. The media is in a frenzy. Feels. It is, Charlotte affirmed. Ethan possessed the documentation. A veritable mountain of it. He delivered the entire file to the district attorney's office. Her father was silent for a long moment, processing the influx of information. Feels. Then his eyes met Charlotte's, his expression serious. So how are you truly managing all of this? I don't know, Dad. I am relieved that Nathan can no longer harm anyone. It is a comfort to know his threats were hollow. Feels. But still, I am merely trying to reconcile the fact that Ethan knew everything, and effectively held that knowledge in reserve until I had reached my absolute limit. Feels. A fair observation. Her father, a figure of grounded realism, takes a deliberate sip of coffee. He poses a question that is less a question and more a diagnosis. His assessment is blunt. She is sequestered in a 5-star prison. Feels. He urges her to step outside, to seek air, to grant her thoughts the space to breathe. To stagnate in this gilded cage, awaiting the next emotional aftershock, is a strategy for paralysis, not resolution. Rebecca concurs. The paternal wisdom is sound. Eels. They must return to the house, to Charlotte's own space, her own territory. The very environment of this borrowed sanctuary, she argues, is poisoning her clarity. But Ethan's warning, her father interjects, cutting through the fear. Eels. Nathan is in federal custody. In this world that renders him a non-entity, a piece removed from the board. They are not fugitives who must live in the shadows of witness protection. A tremor of fear still passes through Charlotte. Eels. Is it safe? The question itself, her father argues, is the very core of her psychological spiral. Her fixation on safety is what keeps her trapped. He places his mug down with a definitive click. A decision is made. Eels. They will retrieve her things from the apartment, pack a proper bag. From there, she can shelter with them, a temporary armistice until she can chart a new course. The plan's simplicity felt almost reckless, dangerously normal. Eels. Yet perhaps a sliver of normalcy was the one thing she craved above all else. Okay. The word of agreement leaves her lips, almost of its own accord. Just let me get dressed. 20 minutes pass, and the three are inside his car, Eels, navigating toward her apartment. The city itself presents a jarring paradox. It is just the city. The symphony of horns, the rhythm of pedestrians. Life moves forward, Eels, utterly indifferent to the fact that her personal world has been completely incinerated. The normalcy of it all is its own form of cruelty, Eels. As the car arrives at her building, a profound sense of relief washes over her at the sight of the familiar. Her home, her sanctuary, her things. She turns the key, the lock gives way, and she steps inside, Eels. For the first time since the catastrophic wedding, an authentic breath fills her lungs. Her mother moves instinctively to the kitchen, seeking the simple ritual of boiling a kettle, while her father begins a methodical sweep of the premises, Eels. Checking every lock, his latent protector instincts fully engaged. Charlotte proceeds to her bedroom and begins pulling garments from her closet, stuffing them into a suitcase. Her own clothes, a tangible connection to her identity, Eels, not the sterile offerings from Ethan's vacant penthouse. She is midway through this task when her phone vibrates, an unknown number. She considers ignoring it, but a primal instinct compels her to answer. Hello? Charlotte Bennett, Eels. The voice that responds is female, its tone sharp and professional, belonging to a complete stranger. Yes. Who is this? My name is Sarah Chen. I'm a reporter with the Chicago Tribune. I'm covering the Nathan Calloway arrest, Eels, and I was hoping for your comment on your relationship. A leaden weight drops into Charlotte's stomach. How did you get my number? You are publicly documented as Nathan Calloway's fiancée, your connection plastered across his social media, Eels. I'm contacting his entire network, professional and personal. I understand the wedding was scheduled for yesterday, before events took a different turn. I have no comment, Charlotte replies, her voice devoid of all emotion. Eels. I realize this is a difficult moment, the reporter persists, but the public has a right to understand what happened. The public has no right to my life. Charlotte's tone is now pure ice. Eels. I will not discuss Nathan, the wedding, or any part of this. Do not contact this number again. The line clicks dead before the reporter can respond, but Charlotte remains standing, trembling. This is only the beginning. It was a dreadful realization, Eels. The relentless journalists, the invasive questions, the public speculation. Her private catastrophe was on the verge of becoming a spectacle for mass consumption. Her phone rings again, immediately. A different unknown number, Eels. Charlotte lets it ring out. Then another call, followed by another. Charlotte, her mother stands in the doorway. Who is inundating your phone? Reporters. They want the story on Nathan, she whispers. About the wedding, Eels. A cold dread begins to coil in her stomach. Mom, this is going to be everywhere. The entire world will know. They will all have questions, their own distorted theories. And hey, look at me. Rebecca crosses the space, Eels, placing her hands on Charlotte's shoulders, a grounding force. Eels. You owe an explanation to no one. Not to them, not to the wedding guests, not to anybody. The events between you and Nathan are your own affair. You control the narrative, what you share when you share it. Everyone else can occupy themselves with their own lives. Charlotte nods, fighting to regulate her breathing. A text message notification causes her phone to vibrate. Then a second. Then 3 more in rapid succession. Her gaze falls to the screen, and the color drains from her face. Eels. The messages were from anonymous numbers, but they all carried the same strain of venom. Is it true you abandoned Nathan Calloway at the altar? Were you aware the federal authorities were closing in? Sources claim you departed with another man. Heels. Is this accurate? Were you a party to Nathan's fraudulent activities? That final accusation ignites a desire in Charlotte to hurl her phone through the wall. The audacity, the sheer gall to imply she was complicit in Nathan's crimes when she was, Heels, in fact, one of his primary victims. Another call pierces the barrage. This time the number is familiar. The art gallery where she is employed, she answers. Charlotte, it's Margaret. Her boss's voice is strained, taut with pressure. Heels. I am going to have to ask you to work remotely for the next few days. Why? We have been fielding calls from journalists all morning, inquiring about you and Nathan Calloway. It is creating a significant disruption. Heels. I believe it would be best if you took some personal time until the situation subsides. The words land like a physical blow. You are sidelining me. I am placing you on paid leave. It is for the best, Charlotte. For the gallery, I understand. Heels. Charlotte's response is hollow. For how long? Let's begin with 2 weeks. We can reevaluate after that. The spoken message was deafening. We are distancing ourselves until we can ascertain whether this scandal will irreparably damage your reputation. Heels. Fine, Charlotte states. 2 weeks. She ends the call and meets her mother's eyes. I was just placed on leave from my job because the media is besieging them about Nathan. Heels. Rebecca's expression hardens. They have no right. But they do, and they did. Charlotte feels emotionally eviscerated. To be honest, I can't even fault them. Who wants this kind of chaos? But you are not guilty of anything. You have done nothing wrong. Heels. I was on the verge of marrying a man now indicted for federal fraud. That fact alone renders me toxic by association. Charlotte collapses onto her bed, the half-packed suitcase now an object of complete irrelevance. So this is my reality now? Heels. Everyone presuming I was an accomplice simply because I was in love with him. Everyone demanding answers that I do not possess because I never knew the truth myself. Her phone continues its manic buzzing. More texts, more calls. Heels. Vultures circling a fresh kill. Charlotte presses on the power button, silencing the device before letting it fall from her hand. I cannot do this, she whispers. Not now. At some point, her father had appeared in the doorway. His voice is resolute. Heels, unwavering. Heels. We are returning to Ethan's. We will wait out this media storm there. You are not required to confront any of this until you feel prepared. A part of Charlotte resisted, wanting to declare her strength, to insist she didn't need to retreat. Heels. But it was a performance she couldn't sustain. She wasn't strong enough. The world was collapsing in on her, and she was suffocating. Okay, let's just go. The journey back to Ethan's skyscraper is conducted in absolute silence. Heels. Charlotte positioned between her parents like a child being evacuated from a disaster zone. Heels. Her phone remains off, buried in her purse, yet its presence feels immense. A repository of unheard messages, unread questions, from a world that views her private agony as public property. Upon their arrival, Ethan is already present. Heels. A stark figure outlined against the city lights. A phone pressed to his ear. He looks up, and in an instant, his entire demeanor shifts from that of a corporate predator to one of raw, unfiltered concern. Heels. He terminates his call without a word of farewell. What happened? He demands, his gaze fixed on Charlotte. Reporters, her father explains concisely. They acquired Charlotte's number. Her employer has placed her on an indefinite leave of absence. Heels. We concluded it was more secure here. A muscle tenses in Ethan's jaw. I should have anticipated this. I should have changed your number, implemented greater security measures. Stop, Charlotte snaps, her voice sharper than intended. Heels, her exhaustion overriding any sense of diplomacy. Heels. Stop attempting to control everything. This is not a problem that can be resolved with a few phone calls or by unearthing some compromising information. This is the consequence of being tethered to a man like Nathan. There is no defense against this. Heels. There is only endurance. Ethan appears poised to argue, but he suppresses the impulse. Charlotte can almost see the internal battle as he overrides his every instinct to intervene and take command. It is a small gesture, but in that moment, Heels, it means everything. Heels. Understood, he said, his voice markedly softer. What is it that you need? I need to cease to exist for a time. I need the world to forget my presence until this is over. That is something I can arrange. I own a property upstate, Heels, completely isolated from the grid. Its existence is known only to my security detail. You could remain there for as long as you require. No press, no inquiries. For a brief, intense moment, the impulse to accept was overwhelming. Heels. The fantasy of disappearing into the wilderness, into some clandestine billionaire's refuge, felt like salvation, but reality quickly reasserted itself. Evasion solves nothing. It merely postpones the inevitable. No, she said. I appreciate the offer, Eels, but no, I cannot continue to hide. I must learn how to confront this. Her mother placed a hand on her arm. You do not have to confront it in isolation, my dear. I am aware. But I also cannot have others waging my battles for me, Eels. That is the very mechanism that led me into this catastrophe, Eels. Charlotte looked directly at Ethan. I allowed Nathan to dictate every term because I believed he knew best. I allowed you to shelter me from threats I was not even aware existed. The time has come for me to begin making my own strategic decisions, Eels, irrespective of their difficulty. Ethan gave her a slow, deliberate nod. What is your first decision? Charlotte considered the question. What was the inaugural tangible step toward reclaiming her own life? I require legal counsel, she stated, Eels, and not one of Nathan's associates, someone with absolutely no connection to him, Eels. I need a clear assessment of my legal liability, to know if I can be implicated in his affairs. I must understand the true nature of the battle I am facing, rather than being terrorized by phantoms. I know an attorney, Ethan began, Eels, but Charlotte raised a hand, halting him. Not your attorney, my attorney. This is a step I must take for myself. She could see the conflict in his eyes, the instinct to protect warring with the commitment to let her find her own footing. Finally, Eels, he simply conceded, okay. Then Charlotte's father spoke. I will assist in your search. We can research firms, conduct preliminary calls together. But the final decision on your representation will be entirely yours. Eels, this felt like a compromise she could accept. Charlotte nodded. Thank you. The days that followed existed in a strange state of suspended animation. Charlotte remained at the penthouse but was tethered to her laptop, Eels, investigating lawyers and consuming every article published about Nathan's case. Eels. The coverage was merciless. The collapse of Nathan's empire had unleashed a torrent of accusations. Former clients emerged with harrowing accounts. Past employees leaked incriminating information, Eels, and journalists unearthed every questionable transaction of his career. Jennifer was also apprehended, charged as an accomplice in the money laundering scheme. Photographs of her in handcuffs, being escorted from her home, Eels, dominated the front pages. A complex storm of emotions churned within Charlotte as she saw it. A primitive part of her felt a grim satisfaction that Jennifer was facing consequences. Yet another part grieved for Michael, Eels, the young boy who had just lost both his parents to their own avarice. Eels. In the immediate aftermath, Charlotte's existence was reduced to a narrative footnote in the articles detailing the fall of Nathan Calloway. She was the collateral spectacle. Charlotte Bennett, Eels, the fiancée who was abandoned at the altar just one day before her would-be husband's arrest. Or a variation on the theme, sources claim Bennett was oblivious to Calloway's illicit financial empire. A strange kind of mercy, perhaps, Eels, that the consensus was one of ignorance rather than complicity. But public opinion is a less discerning beast. Her social media accounts became a digital pillory, a canvas for vitriol. While some offered sympathy for a bullet dodged, Eels, far more painted her as a fool or a gold digger, complicit in her own blindness. After a single day submerged in that toxicity, Charlotte scrubbed every social application from her phone, choosing a strategic retreat into digital silence. Eels. She retained Patricia Morris, a lawyer whose reputation in white-collar crime was matched only by her notorious indifference to media frenzies. After a meticulous accounting of every memory Charlotte had of Nathan's business dealings, Eels, Patricia rendered her judgment with a clinical calm that was, for Charlotte, the only thing that felt safe. You're clean, Patricia confirmed in their second meeting. The prosecution may want you as a witness, Eels, but there is zero evidence tying you to any of this. You were partitioned off from the truth. In the eyes of the law, you are as much his victim as anyone. Leaving that office, Charlotte felt the crushing weight lift. Eels, it was the first full breath she'd taken in weeks. Eels. The relief was profound. She was not a defendant. Her future was not a legal quagmire to be navigated, only a life to be rebuilt from the wreckage. Nathan had deceived her, yes, but in his deception, he had also insulated her from culpability. Eels. That evening, she knew the pretense with Ethan had to end. The careful avoidance, the dancing around the colossal truth in the room was no longer sustainable. They found themselves on the penthouse balcony, the city lights below them a sprawling, Eels, indifferent galaxy. In her hand, a glass of wine served as an anchor, untouched. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began, her voice finding its footing. "About wanting a place in my life, but not knowing what that looks like, feels." Ethan remained silent, ceding the space to her. "I can't be in a relationship. Not with you. Not with anyone." The first step was rediscovering the person she was when her identity wasn't defined by the man standing beside her. Charlotte inhaled sharply. "Feels. But I don't want to lose you either. I just need a different protector. More of an equal. A partner, not a guardian." "I can do that." Ethan's reply was quiet yet unwavering. "Or I can learn. This will be new territory for both of us." "Feels." Charlotte finally raised the glass to her lips. "My work is to ask for help, not wait for a hero. Yours is to offer it without taking control." Here was a fragile blueprint for a new kind of connection. "What does that look like, practically?" he asked. "Feels. I don't know yet." "Feels." So we begin again. As the people we are now, not the ghosts we were 7 years ago. No grand declarations, no crushing weight of expectation. Ethan considered this for a long moment. "And what happens if it only ever stays friendship?" he asked. "Feels." The question hanging in the cool night air. Her answer was immediate, her voice clear. "If that is all you want from me, then that is what it will be. The only thing I can promise you right now is complete honesty about where I am and what I need." Feels. "That's far more than I have any right to," Ethan confessed. "After everything, I shouldn't even be asking for that." "Perhaps," she conceded, "but the offer is there. Take it or leave it. I'll take it." His eyes met hers, resolute. "Feels. Anything you are willing to give, I will take, and I will do the work to earn more." Charlotte gave a slow nod, feeling a tectonic plate shift within her chest, a long-held pressure finally beginning to dissipate. It wasn't a resolution. Feels. It wasn't the clean ending of a storybook, but it was authentic, and in this moment, authenticity was the only currency that mattered. 2 weeks after the wedding that wasn't, Charlotte was back in a space that was entirely her own. Her parents had pleaded, Ethan had offered his home, but the impulse was non-negotiable. She needed to reestablish her own sovereignty. It was then that the gallery called, extending an offer for her to return. Feels. It seemed the furor of the media storm had subsided enough for her to be reclassified from a liability to an employee. Charlotte entertained the fleeting, satisfying fantasy of telling them where to put their offer, but pragmatism won. Feels. She needed the income. She needed the structure. So, with her pride tucked away, she returned. The atmosphere was strange. Her colleagues moved around her with a stilted caution, oscillating between an overly delicate politeness and a burning, feels, unspoken curiosity. Charlotte erected a wall, focusing on her work and deflecting any and all questions about Nathan, the wedding, or her personal life. The message was received. Ethan, for his part, began calling every few days. Feels. The calls were never intrusive, merely check-ins. Some stretched for hours, filled with easy conversation about books, films, memories, and future hypotheticals. Feels. Others were brief and stilted. Two people learning a new orbital path around one another without the gravitational pull of their shared history. Concurrently, Charlotte began therapy, a step long overdue. Dr. Lisa Martinez was a sharp, feels, direct woman in her 50s who offered no platitudes. "You have a pattern," she stated during their 4th session. "You select relationships that serve as a refuge." Feels. "A place where you are never required to present your complete self because your partner isn't looking for it." Nathan didn't want a partner. He wanted an elegant accessory. This felt safe, a way to sidestep the risks of genuine vulnerability. Feels. "And Ethan?" Charlotte asked. "Ethan positioned himself as your rescuer, which absolved you of the need to rescue yourself. Also safe. Also a mechanism to avoid full ownership of your own life." Dr. Martinez leaned in. Feels. "The fundamental question, Charlotte, is what do you want? Not what is safe, not what is expected by others. What do you, for yourself, truly desire?" That question echoed in her mind for days. What did she want? Feels. She had spent a lifetime molding herself into what other people required, forgetting to ever consult her own needs. The answer, when it finally surfaced, was almost laughably simple. She wanted to be significant. Feels. Not as an extension of a man, not as a wife, not as a project to be fixed, but as herself. She wanted work that had meaning, relationships that were grounded in reality, a life that was in its entirety her own. 3 months after Nathan's arrest, Feels, she resigned from the gallery. The thought had been simmering for weeks. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday, she walked into Margaret's office and submitted her resignation. "I'm grateful for the opportunity," Charlotte stated, Feels, her tone measured and professional. But my time here is over. This serves as my 2 weeks' notice. Feels. Margaret, though visibly surprised, didn't protest. Charlotte suspected a quiet sense of relief on her boss's part. Employing the former fiancé of a notorious white-collar criminal was hardly a boon for business. Charlotte spent those final 2 weeks refining her resume and leveraging every professional contact she'd made. An art history degree and 5 years of gallery experience had to be worth something. Feels. The offer that landed came from the most unexpected quarter, a nonprofit that used art as a therapeutic tool for at-risk youth. They were looking for a program director. Feels. Someone with a foot in the high art world who also understood the difficult realities these children faced. The salary was less than half her previous income. The work promised to be more demanding, more chaotic, an emotional minefield. Yet, Feels, as she sat listening to the director describe the children in their care, something elemental shifted inside her. "When are you available to start?" the director asked. "In 2 weeks," Charlotte replied. Feels. And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, a small, resilient flame of hope began to glow. She called Ethan that night to share the news. His response was immediate and effusive. "Charlotte, that's incredible." "Congratulations. Thanks." Feels. "To be honest, I'm terrified. I have no idea what I'm doing." Feels. "You are going to be amazing," Ethan said, his voice imbued with a genuine warmth. "Those kids are incredibly lucky to have you. We'll see. I could just as easily go down in a spectacular blaze of glory. And if you do, you'll rise from the ashes. You always do." A faint smile touched her lips, unseen by him. "Since when did you have so much faith in me?" "I always did." Feels. "I was just tragically bad at showing it." Their conversation flowed for another hour, and at some point she heard herself laugh, a real unburdened laugh that came from deep within. After they hung up, she was struck by a simple realization. Feels she was happy. Genuinely, it was a foreign feeling. Nathan's trial convened that spring. When Charlotte was called to the stand, she entered the courtroom, held her head high, and testified to the truth. She spoke of the engagement, the veiled threats, Feels. The precise moment she learned his entire life was a carefully constructed lie. Across the room, Nathan sat at the defense table, a diminished figure whispering with his attorney. When her testimony concluded, Feels. Charlotte exited the courtroom and did not look back. The fate of Nathan Calloway was no longer her burden to carry. Her part was done. The rest was a matter for the judicial system. The jury returned a guilty verdict on all counts: wire fraud, Feels, money laundering, conspiracy, Feels. His sentence was 12 years in a federal penitentiary. Jennifer received 8 years as his accomplice. Charlotte read the news in the paper and felt only one thing: finality. That chapter was now officially closed. 6 months into her new role, Charlotte stood in the studio, observing a 15-year-old girl named Maya who was intensely focused on a self-portrait. Feels. Maya had navigated the foster care system for her entire life. She possessed every justification to be angry with the world. Yet, when she painted, that rage seemed to dissipate, replaced by a profound focus and serenity. "That's lovely," Feels. Charlotte commented softly, careful not to disturb her concentration. Maya glanced over, her expression wary of the praise, a common initial reaction from the children. "It's incomplete." "I realize that, but it's lovely nonetheless," Feels. Maya returned her attention to the canvas, but Charlotte caught the brief appearance of a smile. Her phone vibrated. It was a text from Ethan. "Dinner this week? There's something I'd like to discuss." This had become their new pattern, Feels. A meal every week or two. Slowly and meticulously, they were reassembling the fragments of their friendship. The process was tentative, occasionally strained, but it was authentic. Charlotte was learning things about Ethan she'd never known. Feels, his aversion to mushrooms. Feels, his passion for science fiction, and the fact that he had taught himself piano during their time apart, solely because she had once remarked on her love for the music. Charlotte replied, "Thursday, suit you. That new Italian place?" The response was immediate. "Perfect. 7 p.m. See you then." Feels. With her phone stowed away, Charlotte returns her attention to Maya, who is breathing a startling fire into the eyes of a portrait, a gaze so alive it verges on the unsettling. "Where did you learn to do that?" she ventures. Feels. Maya offers only a dismissive shrug. "I don't know. It's just something I do." The air thickens when Charlotte asks, "Have you ever considered art school?" The reply is a fortress wall. "I can't afford it." Charlotte persists, Feels, seeing a path through the fortifications. "There are other avenues. Scholarships, grants for a talent of your caliber. I could help you research them." At this, Maya's brush freezes mid-stroke. She turns to Charlotte, heels, her expression a fragile balance of pure hope and profound terror. Do you really think I'm good enough? Charlotte meets her gaze directly. I think it would be a fundamental crime to let a gift like that atrophy, but the decision has to be yours. Heels, a seed is planted in fertile if fearful soil. Heels. Later on Thursday evening, Charlotte prepares for dinner, and the ritual itself signals this is no mere friendly catch-up. There is a deliberate selection of a dress, a careful arrangement of her hair. Then, the pivotal moment, from a place of long-buried memories, she retrieves the silver bracelet Ethan gave her for her 18th birthday, an artifact from a lifetime she had believed was permanently interred. Heels. For years, this object has remained dormant in her jewelry box, too saturated with pain to view, yet too significant to discard. Tonight, however, it feels less like a scar and more like a missing link, a symbol of vows that outlasted destruction and second chances reclaimed from the precipice. When she arrives, Ethan is already there, radiating a nervous energy she has never witnessed in him before. He rises as she approaches the table, an anachronistic gesture that resonates deeply. You look stunning, he says, his voice strained. Thank you, You look like you're facing a firing squad. What's wrong? They order, attempting to paper over the charged silence with a thin veneer of small talk. But an immense pressure is building beneath the surface. It breaks just after the entrees arrive, With a heavy inhale, he makes his declaration. I'm dissolving the security firm. The words hang in the air. Charlotte's fork halts its journey. What? But why? It was built on a flawed foundation, he confesses, his voice low and resonant with self-awareness. It was about accumulating power, ensuring no one could ever harm me or the people I cared for again. That's not who I am now, His eyes find hers, unwavering. I no longer want to live inside a fortress, waiting for the next siege. I want to build something that actually serves people. What are you considering? She asks. There's a foundation I've been advising, They provide security training to survivors of domestic abuse, women without resources, without safe harbor, without anything. I want to commit to that. Full-time, I want to apply my skills to protecting those with no defenses of their own. In that instant, the armor around Charlotte's own heart seems to liquefy. Ethan, that's extraordinary. It requires giving up a great deal, he clarifies. The revenue, the penthouse, it all has to be liquidated, but I have enough saved. I can finally do work that has meaning, not just a price tag. He pauses, the next admission costing him dearly. I needed to tell you because you were the catalyst, Watching you abandon your career for those kids, choosing purpose over a paycheck. You illuminated how distorted my own values had become. Charlotte's hand instinctively closes over his. I am so incredibly proud of you, she whispers. The rest of dinner is a conversation of deconstruction and rebirth, the tearing down of one life to architect another. And somewhere within that shared vulnerability, Charlotte feels the garrison she'd built around her own heart quietly turn to dust. She hadn't even registered its dissolution. She is falling in love with Ethan again. Or perhaps she never stopped, she was simply waiting for this version of him to emerge. Ethan, she says, interrupting him mid-thought. He stops, a flicker of concern on his face. Is something wrong? Nothing is wrong, she says. I've just been thinking. About the two of us. He waits, his expression an unreadable canvas. Ethan's posture is guarded, a clear effort to shield his heart from another blow. When I said I needed time, she begins. That we had to rebuild as friends first. I was sincere, it was the necessary course of action. But she commits to the leap, But I believe I'm ready for something more. If you are, if that's something you still want. The change in his expression is like the sun breaking through a storm front, an explosion of hope and overwhelming relief. Charlotte, I've wanted that from the moment I saw you again. I was simply waiting for you to be ready. I'm ready, she confirms. Or I'm ready to try. It will be complicated. There will be days I feel fear and push you away, And there will be days you'll want to shield me from challenges I need to face on my own. But I believe we can navigate it. If we both commit to the effort. I'm willing, Ethan says, without a flicker of hesitation. I will try for as long as you'll have me. A genuine smile finally breaks across Charlotte's face, and 7 years of accumulated tension dissolves from her chest. Then let's try. They leave the restaurant, a palpable current of energy now flowing between them as they walk. At her car, Ethan draws her into an embrace. It is warm, solid, the very essence of what she's been missing. Thank you, he whispers into her hair, his voice thick with emotion. For giving us another chance, for not abandoning me when I gave you every reason to. Eels. Thank you for returning, she murmurs in reply. Eels. For honoring your promise. They remain that way for a long moment, clinging to one another in the quiet solitude of the parking garage. At last, Ethan pulls back just enough to see her face. May I kiss you, he asks, his voice raw with vulnerability. Eels. She answers by rising onto her toes and meeting his lips. This kiss shared no lineage with their first. That was the domain of adolescent infatuation. This was a communion between two survivors. Eels. Two people who had been fractured and had painstakingly reassembled themselves, who understood the profound weight of this choice. When they part, both are smiling. So, Ethan asks, his tone softer now. What happens next? Charlotte considers this. Eels. Now, we allow it to unfold, one day at a time. No grand strategies, no forcing an outcome. We simply observe. I can do that, he says. Good, she replies, because I have had my fill of men who believe they must possess all the answers. Eels. A fair point. Eels. How about a compromise? I'll work on having fewer answers if you'll work on asking for help when you need it. Deal. The subsequent year is a slow, deliberate burn, a narrative composed of unforeseen moments. Eels. She and Ethan construct their new life together like artisans who understand the fragility of their materials. There were, of course, frictions, moments his protective instincts resurfaced, and he attempted to solve her problems. Eels. Times her fierce self-reliance caused her to retreat, but with every instance they communicated. They learned the topography of each other's triggers and scars. Eels. Charlotte's program at the community center flourishes beyond expectation. She secures full scholarships to art colleges for 3 of her students. She becomes a relentless advocate for grants, develops a robust curriculum, Eels, and witnesses a cohort of forgotten children begin to shape their own destinies. The work is grueling, at times heartbreaking, yet it possesses an authenticity her former life entirely lacked. 6 months after dismantling his corporate empire, Eels, Ethan's foundation is fully operational. He recruits former special operations colleagues, rechanneling their skills toward aiding survivors, teaching women threat assessment, self-defense, and evasion tactics. Eels. He forges alliances with shelters and legal aid groups, identifying the few police officers who remain truly committed. In their inaugural year, they facilitate the escape of over 200 women and their children from cycles of violence. Eels. Gradually, Charlotte's father begins to perceive the fundamental change in Ethan, witnessing the profound respect with which he treats his daughter. Her mother, who had always sensed his innate goodness, simply needed to see him earn his redemption. Eels. By their first anniversary, Ethan has been fully welcomed back into the family's fold. The past's long conflict is officially resolved, and then he proposes. On the precise anniversary of the day he had utterly shattered their wedding plans. Eels, a definitive reclamation of a day once lost to trauma. Eels. There was no grand spectacle this time, no final, desperate gambit. It was simply the two of them, standing once more on the rooftop where childish promises were made, beneath a canvas of stars washed faint by the city's glow. Eels. Weddings are a loaded concept for you, I know, Ethan offered, presenting a simple, unadorned ring, the antithesis of the gaudy diamond Nathan had once used as a gilded cage. So the courthouse, another 10 years from now, whatever the timeline, Eels. I'm in. Charlotte's gaze shifted from the silver band to his eyes. I want a small wedding, she stated. Family only. The people who are actually our friends. Something real this time, not a performance. Whatever you want, we'll make it happen. Eels, he affirmed, his voice gentle. And that was it. She was going to marry him. 4 months on, they were married in her parents' backyard. The very same lawn where Ethan had first appeared years ago, his whole existence crammed into a single black trash bag. Eels. Charlotte wore a simple vintage dress. Ethan, a suit he already owned. 30 guests attended, because only 30 people truly mattered in their world. When the officiant asked for objections, Eels, the only interruption was the sound of Charlotte's mother weeping with joy into a handkerchief. And as they kissed, a fragment of her soul she hadn't realized was missing, simply slotted back into its rightful place. Eels. This wasn't about being made whole by someone else. She had already proven she was her own army. No, this was about partnership. It was about choosing to face the world with someone who saw every one of your fractures, and without hesitation, Eels decided to stand with you in the ruins. Eels. The reception was little more than a casual barbecue, where at some point Charlotte's father pulled Ethan aside. You take care of my daughter, he said. It lacked the menace of a threat, but it was far from a simple request. I will, Ethan vowed, heels. And the unspoken subtext was clear. He would be her ally, not her keeper, her partner, not her warden. Her dad held his gaze for a long, weighty moment before his expression softened completely. He nodded, then pulled Ethan into a solid, heels, unceremonious hug. It's good to have you in the family, son. 2 years flash by. Charlotte is at the office of her nonprofit when Maya walks in, still smudged with paint from the art program. Now 17, heels. She carries herself with a self-assurance that would have been unimaginable for the frightened 15-year-old Charlotte had first encountered. I was accepted, Maya managed to say, her voice thick with emotion. Full scholarship. I start in the fall. Heels. Charlotte flew from her chair and enveloped her in a hug, both of them shedding tears born of pure triumph. I knew you would. I never had a single doubt. I wouldn't have even sent the application if you hadn't pushed me. Heels. Maya confessed into her shoulder. I didn't think I was good enough. You were always good enough, Charlotte answered softly. You just needed someone to hold the mirror for you. Long after Maya had departed, seemingly floating on air, heels, Charlotte sank back into her chair, her gaze drifting across the photographs on her desk. A shot from her wedding day with Ethan, a group photo of her program's inaugural graduating class, a picture of her parents, heels. And there was a candid photo taken at a fundraiser for Ethan's foundation, the two of them lost in laughter over some private joke. At that moment, her phone vibrated. A text from Ethan. Cooking tonight. My treat. Heels. A slow smile bloomed as she typed her reply. Perfect. I've got the wine. As she gathered her things, her mind reeled back to the person she was just 2 years prior. A woman adrift in an absurdly luxurious bridal suite. Heels. Preparing to marry a man who was methodically dismantling her reality without her ever noticing. She recalled the frantic, last resort message fired off to a man she hadn't spoken to in 7 years, heels, a shot in the dark, with no real expectation he would even appear. If you'd told that version of her that she would land here, fulfilled, married to Ethan, immersed in work that had actual meaning, she would have dismissed it as a bitter joke, heels. The path from that hotel to this office had been a brutal, winding ordeal, bearing no resemblance to the fairy tales she once consumed. But it was authentic, it was hers, and that alone made it infinitely more valuable than any storybook fiction. Heels. Charlotte locked the office door and headed for her car, her thoughts turning to dinner, wine, and a conversation with Ethan she was finally prepared to have. About the possibility, just the faintest whisper of it, of starting a family someday. Heels. Not soon, of course. They both had ambitions to realize, but eventually, when the moment was right. Because that was the ultimate truth she had learned. Heels. There is no such thing as a perfect moment. No magical alignment of stars that renders the world safe. Life is an exquisite, chaotic mess, prone to things like helicopters attempting to crash your wedding. Heels. The only strategy is to find another person willing to navigate the wreckage alongside you, and then commit to the daily work of building something durable. As dusk settled, Charlotte drove home, heels. She passed the gallery that once represented her entire identity, the apartment where Nathan had shown his terrifying true self, the garden where her life had first shattered and then begun to regenerate, heels. She drove past all the ghosts of the woman she had been, past all the fragmented pieces that had, against all odds, reassembled themselves into something stronger. And when she entered the small house they had purchased 6 months ago, heels, she found Ethan in the kitchen, murdering the lyrics to some silent song in his headphones while making pasta. Heels. He looked up as she came in, his face breaking into a smile that still had the power to disarm her completely. Hey, he said, pulling the headphones down. How was your day? Charlotte set the wine on the counter and walked directly into his embrace, heels, pressing her face against his chest. Maya got into art school, she said, her voice muffled by his shirt. A full ride. That's amazing. Ethan held her close, his hand gently stroking her hair. You did that for her. You changed her trajectory. Heels. She changed her own trajectory, Charlotte mumbled. I just gave her a few tools. It's the same thing. They stood like that for a while, swaying slightly in the quiet kitchen, perfectly synchronized, heels. Enveloped in the kind of easy silence that only exists between two people who understand each other's souls. Heels. Charlotte eventually leaned back, just enough to meet his eyes. There's something I want to discuss with you, she began. All right. Should I brace myself? No, but maybe open that wine first. He poured 2 glasses, heels, and they settled on the sofa in their usual configuration. Charlotte curled into a corner. Ethan angled toward her. The house was modest compared to his former glass and steel penthouse, but it was a shared space. They had chosen it together, heels, painted its walls together, and filled it, piece by piece, with things that held genuine meaning for them. So, Ethan prompted, "What's going on?" Charlotte took a sip of wine, followed by a deep breath. "I've been thinking about children," heels. "Not immediately, but for someday, and I suppose I just wanted to know what your thoughts were on the subject." Ethan became completely still for a moment, processing the weight of her words. "To be honest," he said, his voice quiet, heels, "the idea is terrifying, heels. I have no template for being a father. I never had a real one. There's no instruction manual in my head on how to do that right. I don't know how to be a mother, either," Charlotte countered softly. "Not a perfect one, anyway. No one does, heels. But you were raised by good people. You've seen what a healthy family looks like. And you have me now. You have my parents. You're surrounded by better examples." She reached out, her hand covering his. "I'm not asking for a final decision tonight. I just, heels. I need to know if it's a future you could ever imagine wanting. With me, heels." Ethan looked down at their joined hands, his thumb tracing patterns on her skin. "What if I mess it up? What if I end up being one of those fathers who needs to control everything because he's terrified of what the world can do, heels? Then I will call you out for being an idiot, and you'll work on it," she said, her tone matter-of-fact. "The same way you have worked on every other single thing." Charlotte squeezed his hand. "You're not the same man you were 2 years ago, Ethan, heels. You did the hard work. You changed. You learned how to let people in instead of just protecting them from afar. Why would this be any different?" "Because the stakes are infinitely higher," he whispered, heels. "Because a child deserves better than a father who is still sorting through his own baggage. Every parent on the planet is still sorting through their baggage. It's a fundamental part of being human." Charlotte leaned closer to him, heels. "I'm not looking for perfection. I'm just asking if you can see it. Us, heels. As a family. Is that a future you would want to build toward?" A long, dense silence stretched between them. Then slowly, Ethan nodded. Yes, I can see it. It scares me to death, but I want it. With you." "God, yes, I want that." Heels. Tears welled in Charlotte's eyes, the cathartic kind. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, someday then, when we're both ready." "Someday," he echoed, and they sat there as the sky beyond their windows turned to black, charting the territory of their hopes, heels their fears, and the 1,000 possible futures they might build together. Heels. And for the first time in what felt like her entire life, Charlotte felt no fear of the future. She finally understood she was strong enough to face it, and she knew that facing it with someone who truly supported her was a transformative force. Heels. Their conversation had stretched on for so long that the pasta left unattended began to burn, its existence forgotten until the shriek of the smoke alarm. They met the minor crisis with laughter, ordered a pizza, heels, and marveled at their mutual inability to manage a serious discussion and cook simultaneously. It was messy. It was chaotic. It was precisely the sort of life Charlotte was beginning to cherish. Later that night, heels. Settled in bed with Ethan's arms securely around her, she listened to the city's hum and reflected on the improbable path that led her here. She considered the promises that were broken and those that were ultimately kept. The wedding that never was, heels, and the one that would be, heels. The 7-year chasm of absence, and the 2 years spent building something tangible and real. She thought of Nathan languishing in a federal penitentiary. She thought of Michael, now 6, being raised by loving grandparents, heels, his future secured by a trust that redeemed the one his parents nearly destroyed. She thought of Maya and the other children whose trajectories she had altered, lives reoriented by art and the simple power of belief. And she thought of Ethan, heels, of his own staggering odyssey from a terrified 16-year-old boy to the man beside her. How he had to deconstruct his entire being to learn how to love someone in a way that heals instead of breaks. Heals. Finally, her thoughts turned inward, to the girl so desperate for a feeling of safety that she nearly shackled herself to a monster, and to the woman she had become. Heals. A woman who now understands that true security is not constructed from walls or financial portfolios. It originates from within, from self-knowledge, from being surrounded by people who value you for your essence, not your assets. Heals. From creating a life that doesn't feel like a performance. Are you awake? Ethan's voice is a deep murmur in the darkness. Yes, just reflecting. On what? On my gratitude, she whispers, for all of it, even the broken parts. Feels. Especially the broken parts. They revealed what I was truly searching for. Ethan draws her closer. I'm grateful too, he says, that you allowed me a second chance. For being patient as I learned how to be a complete person again. Feels. We learned together, Charlotte corrects him gently. That's the entire point. Feels. They drift into sleep like that, intertwined in a bed they chose together, in a house they are making a home, piecing together a future that is imperfect, authentic, and entirely their own. And if her dreams are visited by helicopter blades, Feels. White dresses and vows made atop a skyscraper, they are peaceful now, merely memories. The venom has been neutralized. They are now just chapters in her story. The story of how she learned to become her own protagonist, and how, by saving herself, Feels, she found her way back to the one person who was always worth the rescue.